items. If you happen to have a cell phone, if you wouldn't mind turning that on silent or vibrate, I would appreciate it. And if you have to take an important call, if you wouldn't mind doing so outside. And of course, just in case we have an emergency and we've got a stampede here with all these friendly faces in the room, there's an emergency exit out the door to your right and then to the right down the stairs, and there's a second one past the elevator. So I want to thank again everyone for being here. We've got a really, really great agenda tonight, but a very, very busy one. First I'm going to ask everyone to please rise with me for a moment of silence, and then followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thanks again everyone for being here this evening. We are very excited here on the Salisbury City Council to be able to share this next moment with you. This is tonight, and the reason I think we have such a packed house is tonight we are swearing in the Youth Civics Council. And I'm not going to steal Ms. Goff's thunder, but I just want to say that this is an important part of what the city is trying to do to reverse the brain drain and to empower young people, to give you a voice in our community and show you that this is a city that if you have an issue that you're concerned about and something that you care about, you have an opportunity to be heard at this level, to be heard at, in your government, and ultimately to have those ideas implemented. So we're grateful that you're here, and we're excited to swear you in for this 6-month journey that you'll be on through the Salisbury Youth Civics Council. I think it's also worth noting, before I turn the microphone over to Brittany, I think it's also worth noting that we have here with us today not only our clerk of the court, Mark Bowen, who's going to swear you in, but we have our county executive, Rick Pollitt, with us here this evening. And County Executive Pollitt and I have been talking quite a bit about this Youth Civics Council and how we hope from this point forward it will become a Salisbury-Wycomico joint venture. So we're going to expand this so it's a joint city-county venture showing government collaboration. That's kind of one of the principles that we hope you'd learn through this process. And ultimately will be a joint venture so you learn from as many people who are in leadership positions in our government today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brittany, if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium, and you can give an introduction, and then we'll do the swearing in.
Okay. First, I want to congratulate and welcome each member into the Youth Civics Council. My name is Brittany Goff, and I'm a AmeriCorps member who developed and manages the Youth Civics Council. I first want to thank Mr. Jacob Day and the City Council for giving AmeriCorps this amazing opportunity to develop a program incorporating youth into the local government. The Salisbury Youth Civics Council is a formal board of 24 members ranging from 8th to 11th grade students. The Youth Civics Council provides students with the opportunity to take a sense of ownership in their community and represent the voices of Salisbury. It gives them a formal role in decision-making, direct involvement with city officials, help them build leadership skills, learn to communicate with one another in a professional manner, enhance their public speaking skills, and give them the chance to develop leadership knowledge and learn how the local government operates, all while bettering the city of Salisbury. The students standing before me are outstanding, intelligent, and ambitious individuals. They have the potential to becoming successful leaders who have the ability to really make a difference. They are being given the opportunity to craft his or her own legislative idea to bring to the City Council. While presenting their legislative idea, they will give the City Council suggestions on how to better the issue and help Salisbury grow to its fullest potential. To better the community of Salisbury, including the younger population to have a formal voice in our local government to discuss community issues and solutions will be a tremendous asset to this community. Students are a future generation of our government. Preparing them and giving them the guidance to shape them into becoming successful leaders to help build the future of Salisbury into a better place. Thank you.
Brittany, I just want to add a thank you. You have done such an incredible job developing this program, and you've already had an opportunity to meet and work with these young leaders and interview them even, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I know that you have been doing work, plenty of groundwork leading up to this. So we're very excited for this next step. Mr. Bowen, would you like to, and should we have them come up?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, members of the Youth Civics Council, would you mind coming up in a horseshoe pattern here? Council members, do you want to come around if you can? Yeah. And, sorry, Shane.
I will administer the oath to each of you at the same time, so your role is to repeat after me in unison at the same time, okay? If each of you will raise your right hands, please. I, and state your names. Agree that I will. To the best of my skill and judgment. Diligently and faithfully. Without partiality or prejudice. Perform the duties. As a member of. The Salisbury Youth Civics Council. According to guidelines established. By the Salisbury City Council. Congratulations to each of you.
Congratulations to you. Call me if you need. I had served. Your number again because I got the phone. Oh, then thank you again. I had served. I can't get up. Did you see my wheelie? Thank you. Have a good evening.
Do we want to get any more picture parents or anything? Any more pictures?
Go on the website of the city of Salisbury.
Do they want pictures of
Here, and share this with them. Or you can call the city clerk. I'll put her name down here too.
Another day.
Great. All right.
That's the city clerk.
Another round of applause for the Salisbury. You guys can take a seat. Thank you so much.
Now the work begins.
That's right. And Brittany, when is the next meeting of the Youth Civics Council?
It's actually on Wednesday.
Okay.
2 days from now.
All right, excellent. Very good.
May I say something?
Yeah, actually, can I recognize one other person real quick?
Sure.
I also want to note that, these young leaders come to us from the Wycomico County Board of Education, our public school system, as well as Salisbury School. And so again, I recognize County Executive Pollitt and his leadership. I see we have Dr. Handy with us here as well from the Board of Ed, and Dr. Whitehead, who has led the Youth Leadership Academy as well as many other programs developing our youth throughout the county. Do we have anyone else from the Board of Education or Salisbury School here? No? Okay. Well, Dr. Handy and Dr. Whitehead, thank you both for being here as well. We're very grateful. Appreciate you being here.
I just wanted to say I apologize for not being able to get up. I had surgery and haven't been able to walk for 2 months, so it's about to kill me, but I should be officially free at April 6th. But I did, the early ones that came in, I did find out who their parents were and where they lived and all the information, because I am nosy. And I do commend you, to participate, because as a student in school, I participate in the student, I think we call it student council at the time in school. And we were very active in making changes, especially in our school at the time. I don't know how it goes now, but I appreciate you. We'd like to see young faces. I'm getting old, and I hope you all, when you get 18 or 21, whatever the age you can run for city council, do so.
That's exactly right. Any other comments?
I'm very proud to see you here, very happy, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Challenge us.
Absolutely. You know, some of the best ideas come from young minds because they haven't gotten all hard and crusty like ours. So, you know, let those juices flow. And, you know, no idea is a stupid idea until it really is stupid. Okay? So just get out there, talk amongst yourself, and bring the best of what you have to us, please. Welcome aboard, as I said to some of you. Great.
Thank you all. We will now move into our legislative agenda for this evening. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the legislative agenda as presented.
So moved.
All right, motion by Ms. Mitchell. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Shields. Any
Yes.
changes or amendments?
Yes, I'd like to amend to add Resolution 2348 to our agenda. And also, I'd like to move ordinance 2283, because I believe we do have guests here under the ordinances, make that first.
First under ordinances.
Yeah, first under ordinances, that's
I'll
the
offer
only
a second
change.
All
I
right.
see.
We have that motion and second. All right. Ms. Nichols, do you mind giving us an explanation of the reason Resolution 2348 needed to come to the agenda?
Certainly. It was Charter Amendment 2348 approved on February 10th. It needed to be advertised 4 times after that date, within 50 days, and it didn't get done. I did not advertise it, so we need to vote on it again, and the clock will start ticking tomorrow, and the advertisements will occur
Four
for
times.
consecutive weeks after that. Nothing's changed in the charter amendment, and it is the procurement preference
Okay.
charter amendment.
It's purely for the advertising requirement.
Yes.
Okay, and can we make that the first resolution on our agenda?
Certainly.
Yes.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second on the amendment. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you all. Okay. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Ms. Shields, is there a second?
Yes.
Mr. Spies? Great.
Wait,
Ms.
did we
Nichols.
just prove the amendment?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, we
We
did,
didn't
we
approve
just
the
approved the amendment.
Oh, we didn't do the
Yep, let me
amendment.
call to question on the legislative agenda as amended. All those in support, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, thank you. Ms. Nichols?
What we have on the consent agenda this evening, we have February 24th closed session minutes, March 10th, 2014 regular meeting minutes, and work session minutes. And we have 2 manufacturing exemption requests. The first one is for Machining Technologies, Inc., better known as Maytech, and also Delmarva Printing and Design, Inc. And that's it.
Okay. All right. I'd like to, well, we can do that after the fact. All right, all of those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I'd just like to thank our 2 businesses, our 2 industries who are businesses that are job creators in the city for participating in this process. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, Mr. Cordry, by way of presentation, but I mean, this is an exemption for our manufacturers of the personal property tax. And this is something that we've offered and expanded from time to time, and I think it's fantastic to see those jobs stay in the city for as long as possible, particularly with Maytech, a large manufacturer, a locally owned large manufacturer. So, thank you all for your support there. The next item on our agenda is the award of bids. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the award of bids as presented.
So moved.
All right, is there a second? Mr. Spies? Okay. Ms. Miller?
Good evening, council. I have a long list tonight.
Okay.
The first item for the award of bid is for RFP 03-14. It's the skate park design build. The City of Salisbury Internal Services Department Procurement Division received a recommendation for award of bid for RFP 03-14 skate park design build from the Community Development Department of the City of Salisbury. 4 vendors submitted proposals, and an initial review by the Procurement Division of the proposals concluded that all submittals were responsive and responsible. After such determination by the Procurement Division, the proposals were then evaluated by a 9-person panel utilizing a weighted average scoring method. Adira Construction Incorporated, while not the lowest price, had the highest overall score based on the factors of statement of qualifications, approach, references, overall submittal, and price. An evaluation summary has been included in the council packet, and additional details are noted in the Community Development Department memo. The Procurement Division requests council's approval to award the contract for RFP 03-14 to Adira Construction in the amount of $216,250.
Okay, are there any questions on that item?
I have a question.
Shoot.
I look at the vendor submittals evaluation, and since I've been out of it, the cost for each one, you have Atra, but you don't have the other companies. So like, what's the Spawn Ranch and Gridline and Evergreen? Are they the company, the vendors, correct? Maybe I missed it.
I'm sorry, we don't have what?
We don't have we have the price that the one, Adira, our artisan wanted, is charging us, but what was the rest of the fee? What was the rest of the cost from other vendors? I didn't see that. Maybe I'm missing it.
Wasn't there a chart?
We just had the scoring
Well,
matrix.
yeah,
but
I-
it-
You have the
didn't-
scoring, but you don't have the cost.
Correct, it was only 10% of the weight.
Debbie's right
Yeah.
behind.
Yeah, I just, I think if I'm not.
I have
mistaken,
that.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes. 216, double check my numbers here. 216,250. That's what we have left once we subtract from our total available budget the peripheral items that have to be done. That's the first part of the fencing, the parking, and so on and so forth. So the 216,250 is actually slightly under what they bid, so we'll have to work with them to value engineer that. The bids for each one,
Yeah,
because that's what you're asking me.
That's what I want.
Yes. Okay. Okay. For the design phase and the construction of phase 1, those 2 items total for Adira were $240,000. For Spone Ranch, it was $212,000. For Grindline, it was $265,500. And for Evergreen, it was $188,000.
Okay. That's all I need. Okay, thanks. I mean, I'm not gonna do anything with it. I just want, I know sometimes they request it in the council about all the bids, seeing all the bids, so, yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? All right.
Okay, very good. The second item this evening is change order number 2 to contract number 102-13. It's the caustic chemical storage building and feed system, the Paleo Water Treatment Plant. The City of Salisbury Internal Services Department Procurement Division received a request from Salisbury Public Works to process change order number 2 in the amount of $23,979.15 for that contract. This change order would provide for paving and concrete work that was noted as an add alternate on the original bid, plus the cost to make new taps and provide for new union mount probes. Additional details are noted in the department memo, and funds are available in account number 30200-513026-55513, Water and Sewer Capital Projects. The Department of Internal Services Procurement Division requests council's approval to approve this change order number 2 as noted above to Harkins Contracting in the amount of $23,979.15.
Just a question, was the availability of funds in this case, the impetus for including this ad alternate? It was, okay. Excellent.
Will say that I'm glad to see that it was bid in its entirety with this as an ad alternate that we could add on. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, very good. The third item is also a change order. It's change order number 2 to contract 117-10. That was the rebid of the Zoo Animal Health Building. The City of Salisbury Internal Services Department Procurement Division received a request from Salisbury Public Works to process change order number 2 in the amount of $6,561 for contract 11710, rebid Zoo Animal Health Building. This change order will provide for a change to the type of lights installed near the roof trusses and also to accommodate for a different style of flashing that's needed at the Solitube lights. Additional details are noted in the department memo. Funds are available in the noted account, and the Department of Internal Services Procurement Division does request council's approval to approve this change order number 2 to GGI Builders in the amount of $6,561.
Any questions?
I'm looking at the boot detail versus the flat curb needed. I'm not into construction, but it seems like putting the flat curb would be cheaper than putting the boot detail in, but guess not.
Mike?
Evidently not, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right.
I get all kinds of questions. All right.
Why aren't you an engineer?
You should have anticipated that.
Right.
I did read that change order very well, though.
Yes,
to the best of
yes.
my
And
ability.
it is worth noting that the first change order, this is the second one on this project. The first one was actually a credit, a reduction that was $8,295. So even with this add-on, we're still below where we started.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, the next to last item on the agenda is actually the withdrawal of change order number 1 to contract 114-13, the Mill Street bulkhead. The conditions set by the council at the January 13th regular meeting with your approval of award of bids was not met. Council unanimously approved the award of bids pending a review by legal counsel. The issue was whether the good price on the second venture could be agreed to without following the usual bidding procedures for new contracts. Upon legal counsel's review, it was determined that this change order should have gone through a different purchasing procedure. The bridge project was not the same contract as the bulkhead project in another location, and the informal procedures in Code Section 2.32.050, informal bidding procedures for contracts under $25,000, will be the appropriate procedure to follow. Public Works has since proceeded to secure quotes for the work to be performed, again, following appropriate purchasing procedures, and has withdrawn the request for that change order.
Okay. So, do we have a timeline or anything on how long that process will take, Mr. Mold?
It's done.
I like his timeline.
The best kind of time.
No, we went and got 3 quotes. We requested 3 quotes, only one responded, and it was the price right where we needed it to be.
Okay.
So we got them out there and got it done.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay?
Any other questions or comments on this?
You've set a precedent now.
Yeah, I know,
Talk about raising the
danger,
bar.
isn't it? Sorry, Ms. Miller. Go ahead.
Very good. The last item is the declaration of 2 police vehicles. The Procurement Division received a request from the Salisbury Police Department to declare 2 vehicles, number 6 and number 2, as surplus. Both units are in need of repairs that will cost more than the trade value. You'll note on the memo both are 2003 Ford Crown Victorias. Upon declaration of surplus, as approved by council, the vehicles will be used as trade-in toward the purchase of new police vehicles. Additional details are noted in the department memo.
Okay. These vehicles, they have been replaced with the newer models?
They're looking to possibly use these as a trade-in for, I think, maybe the 2 Ford Fusions.
Okay.
The ones that we just approved a couple of weeks
Right.
ago.
Possibly. It depends on what the trade-in value might be versus what we would get them via an auction, and we would go with the higher of the two.
Understood.
Are these the same 2 vehicles that we looked at a couple of months ago?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Then, all in favor of the award of bids as presented, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. Okay, so on our amended agenda here, we have Resolution 2348, Charter Resolution 2348. I will entertain a motion to adopt Resolution
moved.
2348.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Shields. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second by Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Stevenson?
Thank you. Because it's been some time since the council and public last heard this, I'm going to go ahead and read through it quickly. Resolution 2348 is a resolution to amend Article 16, Section SC 16-3 of the Charter of the City of Salisbury, Maryland, to permit procurement preferences when authorized by ordinance. Whereas the Charter of the City of Salisbury may be amended and as is outlined in subsection SC 21-1 and subsection SC 21-2, which refers to local government article subsection 4-305 of the Maryland Annotated Code. And whereas the state of Maryland has enacted certain procurement preferences pursuant to the State Finance and Procurement Article, Annotated Code of Maryland, and COMAR, and whereas the city of Salisbury has concluded that it is in the best interest of the city's residents to permit the use of procurement preferences for certain types of businesses located in Salisbury, Maryland, and whereas the city of Salisbury wishes to authorize the city council to establish procurement preferences. Remember, we went through this procurement preference thing a long time ago.
You're doing great.
With my new braces.
You're doing great.
In the competitive bidding procedure. Now, be it resolved that the city of Salisbury that Article 16 of the charter may be amended as follows. And simply what we did was added in Section SC 16-3, capital letter B, we added the word lowest evaluated and best bid, and in C, added language to say, in the evaluation of contracts for construction of public works and the purchase of materials, services, and supplies, the city may offer procurement preferences for businesses located in Salisbury, Maryland, and other businesses that qualify to receive preference in contracts with the state under Maryland law. So that was basically the content, and then now we just need to go through that again so that we can
Right.
get it advertised.
And just to remind everyone, that's an already approved and adopted amendment. Just to remind anyone who's watching or who recently joined us, this is purely to extend the period of time that this is advertised and to advertise it in accordance to with our charter. This has been voted on and adopted by the city council prior, but we're doing it again for those purposes. Thank you. Any questions, any discussion? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor of resolution number 2348, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next item on our agenda is resolution 2378, accepting a donation of $3,000 for the Salisbury Skate Park Committee from the Tony Hawk Foundation, from the Salisbury Skate Park Committee, and originally from the Tony Hawk Foundation, excuse me. And I will entertain a motion to approve resolution 2378.
So moved.
All right. I
Second.
think everyone literally
Yeah.
said something at the same
Second,
time.
Third.
All right, I heard Mr. Spies and then Ms. Shields. Right. Mr. Stevenson.
The city of Salisbury applied for and received a grant from the Tony Hawk Foundation. And in order to qualify for that grant, there was a match requirement of $5,000. The Salisbury Skate Park Committee, through its fundraising efforts, has raised $3,000 to go toward meeting that $5,000 match. So the first resolution, I was hoping we could do the two of these together, would be accepting, is a resolution of the city of Salisbury accepting a donation in the amount of $3,000 from the Salisbury Skate Park Committee as a portion of the matching funds pledged for the grant received from the Tony Hawk Foundation for the Salisbury Skate Park Phase 1.
What I meant to say and should have said was that this is a match to the Tony Hawk Foundation grant being provided. Okay, and what we will do, what we can do is celebrate afterward with the donors who are here. Are there any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of Resolution 2378, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And similarly, in parallel, we have Resolution 2379, accepting a donation in the amount of $2,000 from Ms. Deborah J. Stam. You may recognize that name. Also contributing to the match for the Tony Hawk Foundation grant. I'll entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 2379.
So moved.
All right, by Ms. Mitchell. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Spies. Mr. Stevenson.
Resolution 2379, as you said, sir, is a resolution accepting the donation in the amount of $2,000 from Deborah H. Stam as a portion of the matching funds required for the $5,000 match for the Tony Hawk Foundation grant that we received, as I mentioned earlier, in the amount of $5,000. Ms. Stam has agreed to donate $2,000 toward that $5,000 match.
Well, I think it's not only admirable that the Salisbury Skate Park Committee has worked tirelessly to raise these funds, but that Ms. Stam, in a relatively unusual situation, has offered to contribute some funds herself as a city employee, because this is something you've worked on for a very long time.
7 years.
7 years. Debbie, I don't know if you want to say anything?
26 days, 3 hours, 11
All right.
And counting.
Okay, well, let's vote on the resolution, and then we'll do that. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you very much to everybody, Ms. Stam, Skate Park Committee, and everybody that worked really hard. Jenny, I know you put in some time too, maybe not 7 years, but you've got some time in. Thank you very much.
All right. All those in favor of resolution number 2379, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all. Can we do a presentation of the, Tom, do you want to accept it? How do you want to do this? You want me to?
Come on, Mr. Council President.
I'll take a big check.
You'll take that. I'd actually take that. Who would like to accept?
I guess I'll accept the check.
It's not what they're voting.
How you doing? I had surgery on my foot, bone spur, been on my feet for 2 months.
No, go that way. We're all set up over here.
Oh, yeah.
Debbie's getting there.
Come on, Deb, gee.
Without Debbie, it's all right, I'm gonna get really picky. Mr. Council President, will you raise your hand up a little? Yeah, I noticed. Thank you.
Maybe even a
I'm
little
sorry.
more.
I really can't. All right.
A little OCD there. Nobody has a skateboard handy, really?
Note the professional pose.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Okay. Moving right along, the next item on our agenda is resolution number 2380. Public comment. Resolution 2380, accepting state grants from the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. I'll entertain a motion to adopt resolution 2380.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Mitchell, second by Mr. Spies. Mr. Stevenson?
Thank you. Resolution 2380 will have the effect of accepting $5,000 in grant money from the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. These funds are in addition to the original $280,227 that the City of Salisbury received on July 15th of 2013 by way of Resolution 2296. These monies will be used to provide overtime for police officers who are assigned to the Maryland State Police Gang Unit to investigate criminal activity, and will only be used for those efforts. Thank you.
And we note that the governor's office did not provide a large check.
It's in my office.
Okay.
No.
All right, any questions or comments? Council? No? All right. All those in favor of Resolution 2380, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you all. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 2381. This is authorizing the capacity fee waiver for the development known as Cottages at River House Phase 4. I'll entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 2381.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Shields, second by Ms. Mitchell. All right, Mr. Stevenson?
Thank you. Resolution 2381 will have the effect of waiving the capacity fees for the development of a project known as Cottages at River House Phase 4. I did want to point out that I believe Mr. Tillman brought in a revised version of the resolution, which changed only from my original version the name, to the extent that in the version I submitted, it says Blackburn Housing 4, L period, P period. Mr. Tillman has improved that to be simply Blackburn Housing 4 LP. And I think that accurately reflects the name of the owner. Is that correct, Mr. Tillman?
That is correct.
Thank you. So that's the only change that the legal department provided. Blackburn Housing LP has requested a waiver of capacity fees for the development known as Cottages at River House Phase 4. The proposed development requires approximately 11 equivalent dwelling units of water and sewer service and is located on Pemberton Drive in Salisbury. The current fee for the 11 EDUs is $38,863. One of the city's goals is to encourage development for affordable housing units in the city of Salisbury. The city of Salisbury is approved under Resolution 1211 for public-sponsored affordable housing to provide such relief if in the event the housing is going to be provided for a rent that is charged at affordable housing rates, which is 60% of the area median income, which would be adjusted for family size. Again, this resolution is simply waiving the capacity fees for the 11 equivalent dwelling units that would be required for the project at a total cost of $38,863. Mr. Schuster is here. If the council would have any questions, and this information was presented to council at a previous work session.
We brought his model back.
He has
I saw
he
that.
has his-
You brought your model.
his
Thank
model.
You, Mr. Schuster. I know council appreciated that in the past. Are there questions for Mr. Schuster or Mr. Stevenson? All right. Mr. Stevenson, the number of units proposed, is that set to change, or is that?
There is a possibility that there may be it may be slightly fewer than the 44 units that were originally proposed. Mr. Schuster shared that with me this evening.
Would that affect the EDUs?
It could potentially, based on the number of units, but I think, and certainly Mr. Schuster, if he wants to come forward and address the council, he can, but I think it would have to get down considerably before there'd be a significant impact on that number of EDUs.
Okay. I guess the one thing I'd want to be sure of is that if it did affect the EDUs or the real estate taxes deferred during the 10-year period, I would want to be sure that the associated amount was changed as well, so the city wasn't waiving a larger amount than was needed, and the city wasn't deferring taxes that wouldn't have been collected. I just want to make sure those numbers are appropriate. So can we count on the administration to report back to council if any changes are
Absolutely.
affirmed? Okay. Because, otherwise, and I understand that we're talking about waivers and deferrals, but I want to make sure that wouldn't be collected if more units weren't, or excuse me, fewer units were built. But again, I want to be sure that we're setting the right amounts for those, since we do specify in the resolution the exact amounts. Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, Going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of Resolution 2381, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 2382, also associated with the cottages at River House Phase 4. Entertain a motion to adopt Resolution 2382.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Spees, second by Mrs. Shields. Mr. Stevenson?
Thank you. 2382 basically is the companion piece to the previous resolution. What this accomplishes, it's a tax deferral for the project as long as it offers affordable housing units. In year one, there would be a 90% deferral, year two, 80%, year three, 70%, and so on, until we would get to the end of the 10-year deferral period. All of those taxes that were being deferred and then accrued during that period in years 11 through 20 would be recovered. The total amount deferred over the period would be roughly $45,000. And I think when we were up and running full steam and there was no deferral in place, the annual tax would be somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1,180 a year. So it offers a declining deferral years 1 through 10.
Well, I just want to say on the previous subject, I'm less concerned about this resolution ever coming back to council because it doesn't specify any amounts. But I think with 2381, I'd want to be sure that council was apprised again if that number changed at all.
I do have one minor question. In the title, line 4, it says development of rental housing. I'm not accustomed to seeing that. I usually see affordable housing, workforce housing, or in this case, senior housing. Is there a reason that's different, or just someone different wrote it?
I can't give you an explanation other than to say, I think this was, for the most part, a cut and paste effort for Phase 3. So I believe that language existed for Phase
So
3.
that was probably back in the day.
Yeah, but
Someone else's day.
could
Um,
certainly be changed.
Yep.
The council said.
Affordable sounds better.
Or senior, I mean,
Senior.
these are specified as senior housing
Yes.
units, so I think I'd rather see that in there because it's more specific than just rental housing.
Okay.
Because we
understood.
have had cases in the past where they were supposed to be senior housing and didn't end up being, so I'd rather see that. So I'll make a motion to remove the word rental on line 4 and substitute that with senior.
But that's redundant with line 6, isn't it?
Well, maybe, yeah, I guess it is, but
I think it is.
Look, I would say if you didn't do that, put affordable housing instead of rental.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Change it affordable.
I'll modify that to affordable instead of senior, since it is in the.
Okay. There's a motion and. is that a
Second, so much, so much.
All right.
Second.
Discussion on the amendment?
No, I'll offer a second to that amendment.
It was seconded. It was seconded.
I did.
I'm fine with that. I do think that the rest of the title specifies that it's for senior citizens with moderate and low incomes, but I have no problem having the word affordable in there. So, I'm not opposed at all. Any other discussion?
No.
All right, hearing none on the amendment, all those in favor of, on line 4, removing the word rental and replacing it with the word affordable, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay, on the broader question, any further comments, amendments, questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of Resolution 2382 as amended, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Schuster, for coming out tonight. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Okay, on to, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. On to ordinances. As you recall, we amended our agenda here. The first ordinance we'll discuss is actually ordinance 2283 for first reading. This is an amendment of the FY14 General Fund to appropriate funds to the Red, White, and Boom fireworks display. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 2283?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Mitchell, a second by Mrs. Shields. Okay, Mr. Tillman.
Okay, ordinance number 2283 is an ordinance of the City of Salisbury amending the FY14 General Fund to appropriate $10,000 for a contribution to support the 2014 Red, White, and Boom fireworks display. Whereas a committee of the citizens has organized to stage a fireworks display to celebrate our nation's Independence Day this year, and whereas a number of businesses, institutions, and individuals are supporting this event through both cash and in-kind contribution, and whereas it is important that the city join with other supporters in the community and express their appreciation for the efforts of these citizens to stage this celebration, now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Salisbury, Maryland, that the city's fiscal year 2014 general fund budget be and is hereby amended as follows. Number one, increase the general fund revenue current surplus available by $10,000, account 01000-469810, and increase the general fund mayor's office community promotions by an equivalent amount.
Thank you. All right, and I believe we have several representatives of Red, White, Boom, the Chamber, Government Savings Bank with us. Anything you'd like to add right now? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to open it for any public comment. Sure.
First off, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Mike Dunn. I'm the chairperson of Red, White, and Boom. The first thing I have to comment on is what Debbie Stam did tonight was extraordinary. I sat at that table for a while, and I was sitting with Melody Carter from Hebron Savings Bank, and I said, is she really donating her own money? That's extraordinary. So to Debbie Stam, congratulations, and to the skateboard committee, congratulations. I want to say thank you, Mr. President and members of the council. Hi, Kim. It's good to see you. Mr. Stevenson, good to see you. And Mr. Tillman, good to see you. I always, one time, former Council President Cohen, I made a presentation here and I forgot my sidekick in this venture, which is Bill Gordy. He was the first phone call that I made, and he's our logistics chairperson. And Ms. Cohen was kind enough to allow me to come back in when I forgot to mention him. So I'm not forgetting to mention Mr. Gordy. Tonight, Red, White, and Boom, along with or in partnership, I should say, in the support of the Salisbury Chamber, we're asking the City Council to make a donation to the fireworks. This is something that the City of Salisbury has a long precedent in doing. I was able to speak with, I've got it back to at least 1984, when the Salisbury JCs came before the Salisbury City Council that's who was then doing the fireworks. They came and made a request. John Cannon did it. I checked with John, and Mark Tillman was kind enough to remind me when we talked about this at the work session that was his first year with the JCs. So that was part of the tradition. I know that in the 1990s, the Salisbury City Council also made contributions to the fireworks. I got that through Bob Cannon, the former president of the Salisbury City Council. I know I sat there in the 2000s with many other members of the City Council, and we made a contribution to the fireworks. So what we're asking tonight is nothing new. Why are we here? Well, Red, White, and Boom has raised $46,000 in the community in the first 2 years, which is extraordinary. We hadn't had fireworks in a long time. It's my opinion that all of the wonderful things that are going on in the city of Salisbury, if we don't support and fund our own fireworks, then everything else that we're trying to do and the statements that we're trying to make don't matter. This is thousands and thousands and thousands of cities across the country have fireworks. What we're creating is a new model for sustainability. The $46,000 that has been raised has been me going door to door, writing letters, going to businesses and civic organizations and friends and family members. And I guess I could continue to do that forever, but that's probably not the wisest course of action. So what we're doing, last summer, I had some interesting conversations in the course of trying to get support for the fireworks. One of them, again, came from Bob Cannon, the former president of the City Council, who respectfully declined to make a contribution because he said that the city of Salisbury wasn't making a financial, actual contribution. Of course, the city of Salisbury has been wonderful. Mayor Ireton and the administration, Chief Duncan, Chief Hoppus, the Public Works Department. We can't do it without them. That said, we're asking for an actual donation. The second person that I had conversation with last summer was Jim Perdue. And the Arthur W. Perdue Foundation has made contributions to the fireworks. And I had the chance to talk to Jim, and he shared with me that while they were thrilled to make the contribution, he was a little bit concerned that costs like fireworks were being passed along to charitable organizations like his. And so I took that note and realized that we need to build a more sustainable model. So that's what we're doing. In 2014, we've entered into a partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm very proud to have Ernie Colburn and Melody Carter here from the Chamber. They are coming on board as sponsors of the event. They're going to help promote it within the community. They're going to help with some fundraising efforts also. We're here tonight to ask the City of Salisbury, obviously, for $10,000. That would be exactly half of the cost of the fireworks, for the record. The other thing that we're doing to build this sustainable model is that we're establishing a permanent endowment at the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore. They have also been wonderful. They are the fiscal agent for the funds that are raised by Red, White, and Boom. So what we're doing is following the examples of other cities in the United States. We're creating the ideal public-private model for success with Red, White, and Boom, with contributions from individuals and businesses, civic organizations, and foundations, and of course, we hope public funds too. So with this, we think that we're creating a better way forward for the long-term assurance that we always have 4th of July here in Salisbury. So those are my comments. I'll be glad to entertain any questions, but I do appreciate the opportunity to speak and make the ask.
Excellent, thank you. And there may be some questions now. We also, and this may be inconvenient for everyone here, but we may actually enter into closed session to review some materials. It'll be very brief, I promise, for everyone out there. But we may enter into closed session to review some materials that were requested by council. That may happen in a few minutes, but I'll offer everyone the opportunity to ask any questions I have of you right now.
When do you need to start the community foundation?
We're going to, $10,000 is the goal, but what we need first is a $1,000 check.
Well, I'd like to, because I know at PAC 14, we're doing the same thing at PAC 14 with Community Foundation. And I think that the city of Salisbury could do $1,000, the first initial $1,000, and then donate the $9,000. The $1,000 would be toward the Community Foundation donation to begin the Community Foundation to show our good faith with the business community and even residents of this community who are doing that. And I think that then the $9,000 could be, would that be acceptable if they did agree here?
If you're asking me, it would
Yes,
certainly
that'd
be
be
acceptable.
acceptable.
Sure.
Actually,
All those in favor?
So I'm just,
I was actually going to suggest a 50-50 split, that 5,000 of this go towards the Community Foundation, 5,000 go towards this year's, and that would encourage folks to do both, support this year's and to contribute towards the foundation.
Yeah, I think there's really a good idea here, making a contribution to the sustaining long-term fund, that hopefully, not that I'm in any way opposed to this, but hopefully could, allow us to reduce the city's contribution over the years, the public dollars invested. I would personally think that, our city should always invest something in our own fireworks every year, but hopefully it could reduce a little bit over the years. But I do think there's something to that. And also I realize that there's a need for this year in terms of cash, so I'm supportive of both. That split is something we can talk about what that amount is, but I do think, we've got two proposals on the table, but I do think doing something like that is valuable.
If I may, the majority of the donation right now would go toward the down payment. My goal is once we create this endowment, we're then going to use that as incentive to get other businesses on board. And so in the perfect world, it's still $10,000. And so the $9,000 toward the down payment toward this year's expenses. I have confidence with the assistance of the chamber that we will be able to meet that $10,000 endowment goal. That is a goal of Red, White, and Boone this year. And so the money that the city is investing would better serve Red, White, and Boone if the proposal that Ms. Shields is talking about, the $9,000 or the 10 in full, were to happen for what that's worth. Because again, I have confidence that we'll be able to use this incentive to go and raise the endowment for this year.
Okay. Well, before we go on discussing that, I just want to make sure that we hear from everyone who'd like to contribute. Mr. Colburn, do you have anything you'd like to add? Thank you for joining us, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Ernie Colburn, CEO of the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce. Mr. President, Madam Vice President, members of council. Pleasure to be before you this evening, and I'd like to personally congratulate Mr. Dunn on bringing back a tradition to Salisbury in the last 2 years and having the vision and desire and drive to take it upon himself individually to make this happen for the last couple of years. And having proven that it is certainly something that we all enjoy and look forward to as we did in the past, and now we have in the past couple of years. This is something we want to become an institution year in and year out in our fair community. There's opportunities down the road with the partnership with the Chamber, and now hopefully the city will be kind enough to chime in its financial support to expand it, maybe even incorporate a parade, 4th of July parade, maybe next year or the year after that, and other opportunities to further enhance the proliferation of our expansion and growth in downtown and to promote the well-being of the city of Salisbury. In 1968, I dropped blood in the jungles of Vietnam to help preserve the right to express our independence in a manner in which we do today. And every time those fireworks go off on the 4th of July, I know why I was there and why I want to be where I am today, and I'm proud to be here. And I'm saying that as stepping aside as CEO of the Chamber. It is important for us to continue that tradition our forefathers set forth some 200 plus years ago, to be able to express our independence and be proud of it each and every year. And I commend you, the council, regardless of the outcome of your vote, for making and taking the consideration of this venture this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Colburn. Thank you for your service. Ms. Carter, did you have anything? Okay. Ms. Gibson, you'd also requested to speak.
Kay Gibson, taxpayer, City of Salisbury. I said in the work session where this was discussed, Mr. Spees asked for an accounting, and I think as a taxpayer, I would also like for an accounting. We contribute without actually writing checks. I would like to know the number of people that we have at the place, the amount of equipment, the actual cost per hour of each person stationed there. That means including their benefits, the actual cost of each piece of equipment, including the depreciation. How much are we already contributing as taxpayers to the 4th of July fireworks? It may be a major amount, and I think it's something we really need to consider. I hear, and it's a wonderful idea, I hear of all the people voluntarily giving of their money and their time. But the difference is they're voluntarily giving. As a taxpayer, when you take tax dollars, I have no say in it. I'm not sure whether that shouldn't be a consideration. Because if people really want this, then we should be volunteering. I came from a small town in Illinois. We always had fireworks, but it was also paid for by the businesses in the town. So that's another consideration. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. To that end, to that point, Mr. Stevenson, do you have any details?
I do. I could share with the council that at the councilman's request, we went back and pulled that information together. There are a couple of different ways of looking at it. If you were to use the FEMA allowance, for example, for a fire engine to sit on site, then the number would be very high. I think it's $175 per hour for that engine to sit there. That said, whether or not that fire engine is sitting on that site or sitting in the bay, technically it's worth that $175 per hour. Outside of that, we've really only had a few $1,000s invested in support in the way of overtime for police officers to help support that event last year. So you could look at it in terms of a few $1,000s in overtime, or take those calculations for the apparatus and what have you to be here and paid for already anyway within the budget. So there'd be two ways to look at it.
That's personally what I wondered, whether or not there was any overtime created, because that's above and beyond, officers that are already on duty doing something. So there is some overtime.
For the most part, it was staff and equipment that was already scheduled. There were a few $1,000s in the way of overtime.
When you say a few $1,000s,
we were under $2,000.
Under 2,000. Okay.
I was really looking to have something on paper to examine.
I didn't get the numbers in until Friday, and for that I apologize, but I wanted to be prepared to at least share the information with you this evening. I certainly could advance that. I know it doesn't help you tonight, but could put those numbers out tomorrow.
Okay. I also understand from Ms. Nichols that we have the donor list that was requested, and that's under confidential cover.
Yes.
I realize that we could review that now in closed session. And would it be possible, if there weren't questions, for us to review that individually? Right now in open session?
Until the event.
I'm just trying to not
Until
ask
somebody might have.
30 people to leave the room.
I don't need to see it. I don't know why
I
it
don't need
matters
to
who
see it.
donated it.
Thank you, donors, whoever you are.
Would anyone else like to see it?
I don't want to see it.
Okay. Do you want to see it then?
Yes.
Okay. You want to see it now or after?
Let me see it now, and I'll just keep my mouth shut. How's that?
And if you have questions, we can enter into closed session.
Thank you.
Yes? Yeah.
I'd just like to say, like I said, I've been under the weather, under surgery, under whatever, I'm recovering. And when I was in the work session, I look at this, because I had 7 children, I had 6 of my own and raised another daughter. And the fireworks was always very important. And then older people love fireworks too, because they can remember when they were children. And I look at this as a public-private partnership. I think you also look at what it brings to the community with people who are spending their money. They're either going to eat dinner prior to coming or after the fireworks. They'll be coming to the McDonald's or Burger King or Applebee's, Evo's. They're going to be spending money in the community. It's July. It could be a summer event, a special event for someone vacationing here in the community of Salisbury. And I'm quite sure we do we still get a portion of the entertainment tax or hotel tax? Or? Yes. Okay, so some tax dollars will be coming back to the community. I don't know how much because of that particular day. But we have children here and we have young families, and this to me is an event that will motivate young people to spend time with their families. The last fireworks I attended was July of 2006 with my husband, and he enjoyed it. He was like a kid, and that's a special moment for me because that following week, in the same week he passed away. So that's what brings back memories to me, how I spent the last 4th of July with my husband. So I think this is very important to be people-friendly. I'd rather see that sometimes than make children be happy and families be happy than just worry about tax dollars. Yes, we have to worry about tax dollars, but what are we going to give back to our people in the community? What are we going to give back? Are we going to feed them to death, or are we going to give them something that they can enjoy and be proud that they're living in Salisbury? And this is one event I think we all should look forward to.
Thank you, Ms. Shields. I have two additional questions for Mr. Dunn and Mr. Colburn. And Mr. Dunn, if you can come up, and maybe Ernie, you can just nod from there, or whatever you're comfortable with, or shake your head. So two additional questions. One, well, actually, the first one's for Mr. Colburn. The Chamber's contribution this year, is it also 10,000? And forgive me for not knowing that detail.
The contribution is in kind through services rendered for promotions and marketing with an equivalent street value of close to $10,000.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Dunn, you're still going to have to fundraise
Absolutely.
for the other $10,000 this year?
That's correct.
Okay.
Actually, we're probably going to be fundraising for 20 because we want to get the endowment of 10.
That was my
and then
next question.
Yes.
Okay.
That's my goal.
Okay.
Our goal, excuse me.
I could.
Yeah. Ms. Mitchell.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Colburn, for your service and everyone else who has served. We hear a lot about people fleeing the city, people fleeing the area, nothing here for them to do, nothing to keep them here. This is an opportunity to do that. We just swore in several young people in the Youth Civics Council tonight to try to engage them civically. I don't know what's more engaging in our American history and our civic duty than fireworks and celebrating the 4th of July, the founding of our country. And if we're not participating in that, are we sending a mixed message there to our kids? We're saying, please come get involved. We want you to understand your government, know how it works, but don't celebrate it. I'm just not sure that's the message we want to send.
Mr. President, may I?
Yes.
I'm very happy to report that the first year that we did this, nobody knew how the community was going to react. Myself at the top of that list. We planned and coordinated with all the public safety agencies. And in 2 years, and public safety officials estimate we get a crowd of around 10,000 people scattered around Salisbury University in the parking lots down on Route 13 and at Bennett Middle School and at Asbury Church. Had somebody, the farthest person who's ever made a comment to me was in the Eden post office parking lot. So we have gathered 20,000 people on the 4th of July in 2 years, and we have not had a single public safety incident. To your point, Councilwoman Mitchell, the community wants to gather. They have proven that they can gather, and they have proven that they can support our community fireworks. And it makes me enormously proud and humbled beyond words to have the Chamber and somebody like Ernie Colburn behind this effort. It's extraordinary. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, unless there are other questions. Ms. Cohen.
When we were discussing this at work session, I believe it was Mrs. Shields who asked the question, is this one time or is this year after year? Because $10,000, quite honestly, we do have a lot of nonprofit organizations that need assistance from the city. Sometimes it's a one-time thing. We have a community promotions budget that is considered every year, where we give money to things like Wycomico Creek Watchers, Salisbury Neighborhood Housing Service, and so on. So my question is, are we talking about 10,000? I'm okay for supporting it this year, and I want to talk about 2 years ago, because I think if we're going to talk about patriotism, there's a particular wrong that needs to be righted tonight. But I just want to know, is this what we're looking at every year? If it's something that you want year after year because people say, gee, the couple of $1,000s of in-kind services from the city is not enough, we want to see a check. I would disagree with that philosophy. I think whatever we are able to do in support of the many, many, many events throughout this city on a regular basis, thank you, Public Works, and to our police department and fire department for the incredible service that they give. We have those things to balance. So I just wanted to be clear from what I heard at the work session versus tonight.
I will be coming back next year to ask the Salisbury city government for a contribution, if that answers your question. I think you and I probably disagree on that fundamental. I think it is a fundamental thing that the city of Salisbury should be funding. They did it in the 1980s. They did it in the 1990s. They did it in the 2000s. And I think it sends an extraordinary message of support. So I plan to be back here next year.
And I guess I represent a third line of thinking, which is that I'd like to see us contribute every year. I'd like us to see that decrease over time to a more sustainable figure. That's how I would like to see it done.
I wouldn't have a problem with that. One thing I would ask is that in the future that this go through the budget process rather than coming up as a budget amendment the times that it has.
Absolutely. I think this should be in our budgeting process in a few weeks, if we're going to talk about it next year. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And if I may, from a planning perspective, I completely agree with you on that because it does. We are planning, and it's always nice to know that the funding is in place regardless of the source. So I completely agree with that.
And I do commend you for looking at a sustainable model. I think that's the way a number of other things, such as the bandstand, have been done in Salisbury, and that's really good because, you know, I went back and took a look at things that were happening in 2007 when, unfortunately, the fireworks had to be canceled. And the Salisbury Jaycees served this community so beautifully for so many years. And they had difficulty that year fundraising. Things were starting to take a downturn nationally, and they had some difficulty. At the last minute, Mr. Albero stepped forward and said, I'll pay for it. But by that time, they had already made the decision and started sending checks back, according to the Daily Times report. So it didn't happen that particular year. We've seen other times when the community stepped back from something. Mr. Dunn knows about the Winter Wonderland of Lights, and I think at one point the chamber, that was kind of under their wing. So these things will change on, a cyclical basis. So I do really commend the idea of creating a sustainable program for that. When I talk about the wrong that needs to be righted, a couple of years ago, this came before us for $5,000 at the very last minute, at the end of May. And I was council president then and took a front page, large headline hit to not only me, but also Councilwoman Campbell and Councilman Spies, because we said no. Part of the problem was I was told, first of all, it should have been scheduled for a work session. I was asked 2 minutes before the work session ended, could this go on the legislative session by Mr. Pick? That was the mayor's request, is that it go directly to legislative session. And I said, well, poll the council. And there was a long, long email back and forth. And it finally came, but one of the things, Mr. Pick, I said, well, why this late and why, I don't know. I think, they need the money by July 1. So I said, okay, I'll put it on the agenda. It came, and Mr. Dunn explained that they had actually had an incredible fundraising. I really commend you. That really is something.
Thank you.
So that they didn't need the money. So I naturally voted no. What really disturbed me was the patriotism of those who voted no was questioned by the mayor in the Daily Times. Mr. Spies, I don't mean to embarrass you, but could you stand up for a moment?
Let's not do.
If I may, I just want you to know that when we talk about patriotism, this man is a decorated veteran of Desert Storm in Iraq. Nobody should ever be questioning his patriotism over a vote about fireworks. There was a comment in the Daily Times back in 2007 from an Army veteran, retired Army veteran, who said, well, maybe instead of fireworks, we could have a candlelight vigil for the people we've lost and donate that money to disabled veterans. I thought that was a beautiful idea. So the one thing that I would ask this community is when we talk about doing something special like fireworks, and I can certainly understand people, wanting to have that, and I commend those who have brought it back, I do. But please, I don't want to ever see us arguing or pointing fingers and questioning the patriotism of other people, particularly those who have served our country in the combat field.
Ms. Cohen, I couldn't agree more, but
Thank you.
let's focus on now and not the past. I understand.
Well, that, I'm
the
sorry,
wrongs of the
that
past.
needed to be corrected because Mr. Spees was owed that.
Well, and he does deserve credit for his service,
I
absolutely.
have to say that I did once sleep through a rocket attack, though. I was really tired.
May I say
Look.
one more thing? The reason why I asked about the $10,000 was I asked because I did want that to be part of our budget, so we did not, it wasn't that I was questioning where you're coming back and coming back. I think that should be a part of the budget until you become sustainable. Because I still agree that we are supposed to be a family-oriented community, or want to be a family-oriented community, and this is a family-oriented event. And just like, I look at old movies, and I see, they show the black and white movies in the city park where people sit down and the city sponsors the little city park movies, and they have little picnics and all that stuff. So I don't see why there should even be an argument or a concern that the city would not want to do this, and people sit behind this table that want to do this, when we have veterans coming home now who feel that they're being totally ignored because of the problems they're having adjusting to reentry in the community. And this is one thing that we could do to honor, and I do honor, because I'm a member of the VFW Ladies Auxiliary and American Legion Ladies Auxiliary, so I am a patriot, and I do support veterans wholeheartedly. My husband was a Vietnam veteran also, so I can support that, but bring the young families and the young children to let people know, because one thing young people say today, older people don't care about them. We don't listen to them. How do we know what we're doing? Because we feel that we don't want to spend taxpayers' money. But kids are taxpayers too when they go to the store and purchase something. They're charged 6% taxes like I am. We're all taxpayers sitting in this room right now, right down to a baby. They pay taxes, 6% state tax. I think they don't give them tax-free because you're under 17. I think they'll charge you 6% tax when you buy something from the grocery store or the Staples or Walmart or those video games, and they cost $59 or $60, and there's 6% tax on that. So these kids are taxpayers too, and we should appreciate our veterans and disabled veterans, et cetera, et cetera. And if someone from a disabled veteran wanted to come here and ask us for some money, I'd be voting for that also.
Well, thank you. I'd just like to say that I appreciate that. I think, we've got a bright future ahead of us. The past is behind us. I realize that it's been difficult at times, but we've got a bright future ahead of us. I think there's a really good proposal for a great community event on the table. There have been 2 suggestions regarding contribution to the Community Foundation Fund being created. I'll entertain a motion to the effect.
Not finished yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Now, if you've got another question or comment before we get to the amendment, you'd like it to be addressed before you get to the amendment, Mr. Speed?
The amendment was,
Well, we've got
My first
two
amendment was, my first amendment was
items
1,000
potentially.
to the community foundation to start their sustainable fund, and 9,000, contribute 9,000 this year to the event itself, and plus 1,000 to the community foundation.
Can we not leave it simple and trust them to put that money in there?
Say what?
Can we not just
That's
donate the
fine.
10,000?
I mean,
That's fine. Let's
Whatever.
address the broader issue
okay, I
first,
have
Mr. Speed.
a couple of questions, though. And one of those is that, I was looking at this list, and without divulging anything personal about the donors, just by my quick glom there, about 75 to 80, maybe even 90% of those donors were individuals, or husband and wife. And the average of the donation was about $100. During our work session last week, we talked about what the benefit was commercially. And you had said something about everybody benefits, all the restaurants, all the places, that people go to after a fireworks and before a fireworks.
Mm-hmm.
Yet on that list, I don't see any of those names on that list. There's not a restaurant on there or somebody that would directly benefit from the fireworks. Just as an editorial comment here. So what I'm saying is that, if we're going to keep on going with this, and the second part of what I'm going to say may feed into it, is that we need to get on these folks to pony up a little bit, okay? There are a lot of commercial aspects, a lot of commercial entities in this city that benefit from an event like this. And I don't think that, just they're regular taxes reflect all they're getting from being here. Secondly, what I was going to suggest as far as the donations itself, in future years, maybe even in this one if we decide to, but I think there ought to be some sort of dollar matching feature going along with that. If X number of dollars are raised from public donations or private donations rather, then the city will chip in for X number of dollars to match that.
Like a 1-to-1
1-to-1,
in future years?
3 to 5, I don't know, but we'd have to knock those numbers around a little bit.
We'd have to raise a lot more money.
But the thing is that I don't want the city's donation to, yeah, I guess discourage, not discourage, but no longer encourage people from donating to the event, and I particularly bring up the business side of it as well, okay? But thank you so much for all the folks who have donated. It's a lot of money. It really is.
If I could, just before my own editorial, as you were talking, Mr. Spies, I looked over at the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and he was nodding along as you talked about.
Sure he wasn't nodding off?
No, I'm sure. I'm sure.
No, sir, that is the obligation and responsibility of the chamber to engage the businesses in a more wholehearted way than previously.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunn, did you have anything else to add?
No, thank you.
I would say that
Mitchell?
that's the match idea I support for future years, but for this year, it's kind of late in the game. Their deposit is due like really soon, or they're not going to get someone to do the display and to say, well, go raise it and then we'll match it.
And when we get to
Might be
that,
difficult.
I would just say I'd like to see us cap the match because,
Yes.
$50,000.
No,
is
to say that
Sure.
we'll give X number of dollars with a
That's
matching
right.
grant, but
Sure.
when we put that in the budget process, that's plenty of planning time, because that's
Yeah.
passed in time for them to raise for next year. But this one, we don't have that luxury.
Okay.
Well, actually, this will give you another 4 or 5 months of mobilization time to get that.
Look, you're looking at a one-person mobilization effort. I just want to remind everybody of that.
You need some minions.
Well, I understand that, but the minions are busy with, to Ms. Cohen's point, there's a lot of nonprofits out here. And if this was such a great idea, some of the other nonprofits would have, you're looking at the minion, okay? So just please understand that.
Understood.
Is there a way that those who are not already committed or would like to assist you, Mr. Dunn, can contact you to provide that additional support
Please
or
let
through
me.
the chamber?
We're on Facebook. We have Red, White, and Boom Facebook page. We have nearly 600 contributors or likes on Facebook. We generate enormous publicity. I've been waiting and holding the donation letter that I personally deliver until this action, simply because I wanted to add, I think it will add to, we've got the Chamber of Commerce support, we've got the City of Salisbury support. Nothing about Red, White, and Boom has been anything but an extraordinary experience. Taking the money now, tomorrow morning, I will be starting the fundraising campaign. So, we have a great presence. Anybody who wants to make a contribution, all the contributions go to the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore. And anybody who's at home watching right now, feel free. If everybody watching right now donated $20, we'd probably be covered.
Do you have
But guess what? That's probably not going to
Do you have a
happen.
phone number or an email
You can
address
call
or a
me,
mailing
yes.
address?
You can find us on Facebook. I'm at dunmike5@gmail.com. I'm not hard to find. I live on Forest Lane. My wife Karen and I, so we're in the phone book. Anybody can find me and us and the chamber. Absolutely contact the chamber, contact the Community Foundation, contact anybody in this room. It's not hard to figure out how to make a contribution to the fireworks.
That's great. So nobody who's interested would have an excuse now.
Nobody who's interested, to your point, that's correct.
When is the deposit due?
The good news is we were such good stewards with the fireworks extravaganza that originally the deposit is due when you sign the contract, and we signed the contract in October. But because we have a good business relationship, they'll take it when they get it, and they know that we're good for it. But the sooner the better, to answer your question.
Before July 4th, I presume?
Pardon me, before 4th of July would be
Okay.
good.
And do you mind if I ask how much the deposit is?
Half, 50% is traditional.
10,000.
But last year, we gave them increments, to give you an example, Ms. Cohen. I'd send them $5,000, then $3,000, then $4,000. We send it as we come in, as it comes in. But the official by contract is 50%.
Thank you.
I think the word I was looking for was disincentivized.
Disincentivized, that's a much better word.
I would view this
Than
as being
discourage.
incentivizing
Right.
instead of disincentivizing, for what that's worth.
And are there, okay, so to the lingering question, is there an amendment to the effect of contributing or earmarking a portion?
I was earmarking 1,000 to begin the community foundation part of it, and $9,000 this year.
All right, is there a second?
I'll offer a second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the item?
Sure. Would it read something like, and be it further ordained that $9,000 of the funds be provided for the 2014 fireworks, and $1,000 be provided for a sustainable fireworks fund at the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore?
It's
I think
officially an
that's-
endowment fund, if you wanted to tweak that language. We're creating an endowment.
Fireworks endowment?
Yeah, Red, White, and Boom endowment, yes. I haven't thanked the Community Foundation yet, but thank you, Community
Yeah,
Foundation.
thank you to the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore.
Yes,
And thank you, Mike.
my pleasure, thank you.
Is there anything, any other comments or thoughts on it? All those in favor of the amendment, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. And any other comments? Okay. All those in favor of ordinance number 2283, this is, again, for first reading.
As amended.
As amended, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Mr. Dunn, thank you very much. Mr.
Thank you.
Colburn, Ms. Carter, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
And could I put in a plug for the city's own endowment fund? We do have funds for scholarships for our police department, for bringing in an outreach toward minority members. It's a very cool setup that I think that the chief came to us with, and also for canine and horse patrol. So if you're writing a check to Red, White, and Boom, please consider writing a check to those very worthy causes, which will contribute to better public safety and a more diverse police force. So just wanted to mention that because it's been a long time since it got brought up. Thanks.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add to that, every little bit helps.
We're grateful to the
Doesn't have to be even two figures worth.
Community Foundation for hosting that fund. Thank you. Okay, next item on our agenda is ordinance number 2276 up for second reading. This is the stormwater utility provision. I'll entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2276.
So moved.
Got a motion by Ms. Mitchell. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Shields. Okay, Mr. Tillman.
All right, this is the second reading of 2276, an ordinance of the City of Salisbury, Maryland, amending Chapter 13, Public Services of the City Code by adding Chapter 13.3 for the purpose of establishing a stormwater utility under the direction and supervision of the Public Works Department, and further establishing a stormwater utility fee system. At the time of the first reading, a number of changes were proposed. The copy that you have in your booklet did not include those. The copy that I distributed tonight was an attempt to include those. I hope we've gotten them all. If not, I'll certainly sit here and carefully note the changes. The first change to be noted, I think, appears at line 124. It was just simply deleting the word A and adding an S after the word costs. The second change was in line 172, removing the reference to the council, so it just reads, "The city finds that the intensity of the development." The next change included is at line 189. It reads there, "Utility fee," and then the words "each year in conjunction with the annual budget" are added. And then in line 195, again, the word council is removed, so that it's the city making the determination. In line 215, it says rounded to the nearest whole number instead of the next highest. Let's see, I think the other changes, let's see, are in lines 219 through 21, so that those lines read, a stormwater utility fee shall be billed quarterly and be made a part of the city water and sewer bill. The words to the property owners at the same time that the bills for water charges and sewer charges are rendered are being struck. Down in line 226 and 27, those two lines have been struck. And what we've done there is this language came from the department, and which I've reviewed and it appears accurate, would establish the fee there as a municipal infraction rather than a fee. And it would be, the individual would be fined, the property owners who violate the section would be fined. Let's see, the next change appears, I think, just down in lines 274 through 75, and that was just updating dates. And then in 284, again, updating dates, as noted that the year was incorrect previously. And that's all the changes I have. If we've missed anything, I will carefully note them.
Question,
Yes, Ms. Mitchell.
that 13.30100B that you just mentioned changing. So we just got this, so I haven't had a chance to really read it through and think it through, so bear with me. And that's a whole separate issue, but are you saying that if they don't pay, they're going, the stormwater fee that's on their utility bill, they're gonna get a fine, municipal infraction, rather than it creating a lien and being treated like other utility fees?
No, I guess we can call it, Mr. Moles, my understanding of the proposed change is that what we're doing is if you, I think my recollection was, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the utility fee would just be collected as would the city water and sewer bill. But for violations of the section, for the people who commit violations, those are the people who would receive municipal infractions. It's not a municipal infraction not to be able to afford to pay. So that's what the attempt is there, if I'm not mistaken.
What is a violation?
Well, it says property owners who violate the provisions of this section, and the section is payment terms and penalties. Payment is part of this, so violation, the way I'm reading this, again, a quick read, sounds like if you don't do what you're supposed to do, including payment, you're gonna get a fine.
Well, it may be the word there instead of section should be type, this particular type 13.3 in general, because I think that's what it's intended, but let Mr. Moles answer your question.
Okay.
I don't think it was not intended to impose an infraction on people who could not afford to pay.
The debate that we had the last time was whether, because it was part of the water and sewer bill, that if it wasn't paid, the way we deal with those kind of things is we do a shut-off. And because it was combined with that, what we proposed was to utilize the language that was done recently for the garbage ordinance, and because the garbage ordinance is also on that bill, and come up with a different approach, similar, exactly the same way that garbage ordinance is handled, as far as non-payment and dealing with it that way. So there's the penalty fee of 5% for non-payment, and then further actions can be taken in terms of the municipal code. That was our way of solving the issue with not having to do water shutoffs the way they are.
I don't know if this is the appropriate place to discuss this or time to discuss this, but, looking at several other stormwater utility ordinances around the state, hardship exemptions have been a applied at the discretion of the Public Works Director as a separate standalone element. The procedures are one item, but even the consideration of a hardship exemption by the Public Works Director is not something that has been included, but something that could alleviate some of these problems if you had the authority to provide an exemption for people in the first place.
Ooh, that's gonna put a lot of pressure on them.
Yeah.
'Cause everyone's gonna ask
But it's
for-
true in Baltimore County, Howard
Yeah.
County, and Baltimore City, they all have it. And they all have it at the discretion of the Public Works Director.
One of the things I know with, a lot of this ordinance is modeled after the town of Berlin. And one of the advice that Berlin gave was to not get into the exemptions market. So we kind of followed that trend that they used.
I understand. Other thoughts, questions? Well, Mr. Molds, if you don't mind staying up there, 'cause I have a bunch. I do have, I do have a bunch. There are a number of things that I'd like to see us consider. And frankly, I don't know the best way to go about this other than to perhaps, I hate to even say it, but bring it back to work session. But I have a number of items that I'd like us to discuss. And I can go through these one by one now, or we can hear public comment first. But I do have a bunch that pertain to purposes of the fund and use of the funds, the ERU rate, the available credit system, exemptions and waivers, grants from the fund, a stormwater advisory committee, and the effect and effective date of the stormwater utility, the relationship between the utility and our property tax rate, and the application or pass-through of an ERU or the cost within a multifamily dwelling and pass-through to tenant. That's an issue I'd like to discuss as well. So we can go through each of those one by one. And I apologize that we're discussing these last minute, and if that means we need to take this to work session, I understand. But I do want to give everybody else an opportunity, as well as the public, an opportunity to comment before we dig into each of my issues.
I would like to hear from the public because I too have some concerns.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I have a small stack of requests here, and we'll start with Mr. Drew. If you don't mind coming forward, Matt Drew.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Matt Drew. I live here in Salisbury. I'm also the Executive Vice President for AWB Engineers. One of the great things that I get to do is work with lots of clients to develop commercial industrial building designs. And one of the components of that is what we're talking about tonight, is to design private on-site facilities for stormwater management. One of the things I would love to see included, and I'll try to keep my remarks brief because it sounds like we may have a lot of discussion tonight, but there needs to be an element of fairness in this ordinance. I think everybody is willing, the private residents, business people, commercial property owners, everybody understands that they have to do their fair share to be a contributing citizen in this town. But at the same time, the folks who have gone through the process of taking a facility, developing it, and meeting current regulations, part of doing that means that they've had to provide for stormwater management facilities on their own property. So that means that they've had to pay somebody like me or some of my colleagues here in town additional fees to design those facilities. They've had to go through the process of getting them approved. It's meant for decreased utilization of their property because they have to dedicate certain space for the stormwater management facilities. And all those are for really good reasons. The reasons that they have to do those things are to reduce pollutant runoff from their properties and to mitigate flood damage to the neighboring properties surrounding them. So they perform good functions. But at the same time, there's been a cost that those folks have had to pay in order to comply with these regulations. I would like to see, and I've proposed some language, but I would like to see an element of fairness included in this so that the legacy investment that previous developers of property here in Salisbury have made in order to comply with those regulations is recognized and turned into a credit for them. So I have a number of other smaller issues, but if I had to speak to a single thing tonight, it would be I'd like to see an element of improved fairness be brought to this ordinance. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Drew, and we have your emailed written remarks as well. I think all council members and the administration has your comments.
Yes.
I think the mayor replied today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Ms. Gibson.
Kay Gibson, Salisbury resident. I have a concern we're starting down a slippery slope. This is just another fee. It can be increased yearly. We already pay for public works and services through our property tax. I'm not sure the city of Salisbury and the people living here can afford an additional fee, tax, whatever you want to call it. I'm also concerned we've done a lot to encourage commercial people to come into town, buy some of the historic buildings, work with them. Now, if we come back with an additional fee, that increased their yearly cost. How many are going to hesitate to buy commercial property within the city limits of Salisbury? Are we going to be hurting ourselves? So we need to think long and hard before we add another cost to moving into Salisbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Mr. McClellan?
Good evening. I'm John McClellan. I'm a commercial real estate broker here in town. And to kind of follow up on her question, any fee, any development cost, any tax is a concern to business. But that's really not what I wanted to say is I personally own, with some partners, some property here in Salisbury. And I haven't really followed this ordinance as closely as I should. I'm quickly getting up to speed. My friend Matt Drew is making sure I get up to speed on it. But a few years back, you're all familiar with Westwood Commerce Park, one of the new kind of modern industrial parks designed to bring jobs, bring businesses, create activity, economic activity. My partner and I developed about a 30,000 square foot building that is now home to 3 businesses, 2 who were new to Salisbury, who came here because we went out and developed the property. Sherwin-Williams Flooring, who has expanded 4 times, as a landlord, that makes me very happy. Albin Tractor Supply also was brand new. They came in from out of the area to Salisbury. When we built the property, we developed it with all codes, all compliances. If you're familiar with Westwood Commerce Park, actually the developers, the Hazel family who developed the park, complied by using their land, reducing land utilization, and ending up with several large stormwater ponds. All of the systems, all of the lots go directly from the lots where we manage bionutrients on into the pond and into a county system. We are a county stream. We do not in any fashion touch city infrastructure. And so as I look at this, the ordinance itself says, whereas to the extent practicable, all property owners based on the impact of runoff of impervious surface from their property into the stormwater system. I'm here to contend, as Matt's talking about, there should be some consideration given to people who have spent the extra money, used more land, developed a much more modern system to manage it. I compare myself to something like, say, the Giant parking lot, where the word stormwater management didn't really exist probably in 1950, and 100% of that water goes into the city system. Is it fair for me on a same per square foot price, value, or tax fee, whatever you want to call it, to pay after I've invested a lot of money in doing that? I know there's a credit. I know there's some discussion in the ordinance about considerations of waivers and credits and best practices, but I think businesses need predictability. They need something that's very simple. They can look at it and say, our building complies with the 2009 ordinance. We ought to get some percentage credit, something along those lines. As Matt said, I just asked for some fairness to be considered because all properties, especially all commercial properties, are not created equal. And I hope that some of this can be included in the final ordinance, because I think it is needed, but I hope it's included.
Thank you, Mr. McClellan. Okay. Next, I have Mr. Taylor.
Good evening, Robert Taylor, Salisbury resident. Some of what I was going to say has already been said, so I'll focus on maybe some other things. First, I got to say, yikes. I mean, this sounds like Obamacare has come to Salisbury. We're going to pass the ordinance to find out what's in it. I don't think most of the things you read, Matt, were in the work session version of this, are they? Well, pardon me, the briefing book.
Yes, they were.
They were in the briefing book as published on Friday of last week?
Yeah,
One paragraph.
Yeah, the amendments,
I must
the
have missed
amendments
that,
were,
Okay, I mean, I've got to be very concerned about a fine for somebody who doesn't pay a simple fee, because that's what this is, in essence, is a fee. So that's one thing that I've heard tonight, and I'm glad I came, so I could comment at least on that. That really scares me. I hope this is headed for work session. But a couple points to be made more generally are, first, there's a scam going on here. And I'm not blaming you all for being the scammers. It's really the state of Maryland. They have foisted this whole thing on local governments. Part of the TMDL program, I won't get into that at great length. The scam comes up from the way they've offered guidance to the local governments as to how to put this into play. And what you don't do is you don't put it in your general fund. There's absolutely nothing stopping any local government from taking government fund money and doing what the state wants to be done with it. It could raise it that way. What would happen to do that is taxes would go up. And we have a tax cap, ergo, there's a problem from the bureaucrat standpoint. So what you do is you come up with this neat little idea that you have a stormwater utility, which you fund by a fee. And that doesn't come out of the general fund, therefore it's not subject to the tax cap. So in effect, you're doing an end run around the tax cap. That's really what's happening here. And it's by virtue of the state guidance. I've seen the documents, I imagine some of you all have too. So that's a point I think that should be made. There would be absolutely nothing stopping the council from saying, look, we'll play ball with the state, but we'll stand up to the taxpayers and say that's going to come out of general funds, and you're going to have to pay higher ad valorem property taxes for it, not this separate fee, which you can now get a fine for, I guess, if this bill goes through as proposed, if you don't pay it, in addition to the interest. It would be like if you don't pay your property taxes in addition to the interest, you're now going to get hit with a municipal infraction. And incidentally, those penalties for municipal infractions, I believe, are so much a day, aren't they, Mark? I mean, what are they? Yeah, it can be up to how much? Up to $1,000 a day. I mean, yikes. So that's point number one. Point number two, and I think John McClellan and others have made this, is if the bill does go through as is the essential unfairness you have, particularly with commercial properties. John took the words giant shopping center out of my mouth. Maybe it's because we went to the same college, a little place up in Pennsylvania with a pretty good wrestling team. But you take the giant shopping center, 50 or 60 years old, no stormwater management. I'll give you a couple projects that I'm familiar with, simply because I've represented them in the development of it. The center at Salisbury, that's about 70 acres, roughly, I think, of impervious surface. The idea is to put a fee on based on your impervious surface. Guess who's going to be the biggest taxpayer, or fee payer, I guess I should say, in the city of Salisbury? Another place, now the center of Salisbury was developed about 25 years ago under an older set of stormwater management rules. It has some stormwater management, to be sure, and that requires the use of some of the property that can't be used for other purposes. Giant shopping centers, 100% used for parking or buildings. The orchard, which was just developed, that's under what was the next to the current stormwater management. You all passed new stormwater management, as you'll remember, a couple years ago, with much stricter standards than what was there before, which was pretty strict. And they conformed to that. So this gives you just three examples, one with nothing, one with some, and another with pretty elaborate stormwater management. And incidentally, the one I just mentioned, the last one, they're now taking some of the runoff from the Skateland Shopping Center. So they've actually helped the situation, not only from themselves, but from another piece of property that had very little stormwater management. So, should there be some fairness here if we go through with this? I think there should. The only thing in the ordinance that really addresses this is it says that the Public Works Department, this is the very last section, I think it's 130 of the last three numbers, that they can come up with some guidance or suggestions about BMPs, best management practices. That probably won't do anything for at least one of the situations I've mentioned. I don't know about the orchard. I'm not an expert on best management practices. Matt Drew probably is. But this needs to be rearranged. And the other thing I think that needs to be rearranged about it is it needs to be in the ordinance. There shouldn't be delegation to administrative officials to do things like this, or for that matter, to do hardship exceptions. There ought to be strict guidelines for it, delegated by the council. If long as there are standards, it can be delegated, but not just the idea, well, the Public Works Director is going to give some hardship exemptions based on whatever criteria he or she wants to use. And I frankly don't care what they do in Howard County. I grew up there.
Well,
I could care
actually,
less,
to be fair,
you know,
and I am going to have to cut you off here in a second, but to be fair, what Howard County and what Baltimore County and what Baltimore City, what I just referenced, what they do have very clear ordinance-based guidelines.
Doesn't surprise me.
But the determination has to be made ultimately whether or not they meet those guidelines by someone in the administration.
As long as it's objective and can be done that way, yeah.
Couldn't agree
sure.
more.
Yeah. So anyway, those are my concerns about it. I really think this is really not ready for prime time, even if you believe it should be done as a stormwater utility with a fee, rather than bellying up to the bar and saying, look, we're going to do this as a tax, part of our general fund, and each year it's going to be discussed, and we're going to do it that way. So that's my suggestion. It needs to go back to work session.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. All right, Ms. Lucas?
Good evening, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, and council members. I'm Karen Lucas. I'm the Executive Director of the Wicomico Environmental Trust. And as you know from my email earlier today, I strongly support the ordinance. I do agree that there are things that need to be figured out. And I trust that the council can figure those out. So I encourage you to vote for the ordinance tonight and work those things out afterwards. I think it's important to get this ordinance on the books. And I would disagree with Mr. Taylor. This is not an end run around. This is an effort to create a dedicated fund to manage something that the current system of drains was never meant to capture pollution. It was meant to direct water from place to place. But as we've grown, as Salisbury's grown, and we've put more chemicals into things, this is a legacy thing. We now have to come up with some way to get the pollutants out of the water that's going into our waterways. And a dedicated fund with strict guidance on how it will be used is indeed the best way to use that. I'd also like to comment just briefly on the fairness issue. I realize that there's a difference between the giant parking lot and other places that are conforming to the 2010 regulations, the stormwater regulations. But let's just be clear that they are conforming to current regulations. You don't get an extra check or star if you do that. When you enact a law, you're necessarily going forward. And yes, some of those people have put in more than they had to. But if you look back, you're going to find that's true of all business as laws are applied in a rational manner. So I wouldn't let that stop you. I think there probably should be some kind of hardship exemption, but I trust the council to come up with one. I would like to see this not go back to work session for changing the ordinance. I would like to see it be fleshed out at work session after you have voted positively for the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucas. Okay, those are all the requests for public comment I received. Like I said at the beginning of this, I have quite a few comments, and I hit all the topics and quite a few thoughts, but just some of the, in response to some of the comments that were made so far, to Mr. McClellan's point that the language in this ordinance addresses their property, the property owner's property for their contributions and to burden our stormwater system. I think that's more than anything an erroneous part of the language in the ordinance itself. What I would suggest is that any contribution to a stormwater utility should be not only addressing your own contribution on your property, but that which is contributed by falling on and polluted runoff that comes from public areas, so areas that we all own, our streets, our sidewalks, things like that, which is a fraction of a portion of the contribution, which is why one of the many reasons why I believe there should be a significant credit allowed for a reduction in the stormwater utility applied. Mr. Drew's language that he has sent us on several occasions shows up to 75%. At the start of this, I was a proponent for 100% credit to be allowed. But again, I changed my thinking on that a little bit because I think we all share public infrastructure, we all share public roads, and if we all put in a little bit, there's got to be some minimum contribution. I also acknowledge and recognize that, to Mr. Mold's points throughout this conversation, it becomes a challenge, and I see that other communities have not have said there's a minimum. Hold on, let me find the language on this. There's a minimum assessed charge, and I know that Mr. Molds and the administration have argued that having a minimum assessed charge below 1 ERU complicates the math, and I acknowledge that. But I think it's a worthy challenge to face. I think it's one of those challenges that it's worth us facing, it's worth us addressing, and I think having someone pay a quarter of an ERU if they are following all the best management practices on their residential property, and really we're talking there about residential properties, anybody who's going to fall below 1 ERU, single-family residential properties. I think it's a worthy challenge for us to figure out. I don't know, how we're going to do it. I just think it's worth us figuring it out. I also still believe in a hardship exemption. I believe that there ought to be a reimbursement process when any credit or exemption is offered or given. I've seen what other counties, Howard County for one, as Mr. Taylor referenced Howard County, they have a form and a process where you simply take a picture of and report your practice on your property, and you report it online based on a list of acceptable practices, and you are responsible for reporting that and seeking your exemption, seeking your credit. I don't know why that wouldn't work here. I think it should work here. Another exemption that I think should exist is the stormwater rules of 2010, MDE's stormwater rules. I think that properties developed to that standard, given the implementation of state law, ought to be afforded a credit at the maximum amount allowed, whether that's 75% or 100% or 90% or 50%, whatever that is. And again, I think, and I thank Mr. Drew for his recommendation. I think 75% as a maximum is a reasonable level to be set at. Also, I just want to note that fundamentally, I believe that pulling this from the general fund is the only responsible act, and I think every jurisdiction should do the same. It is, I don't want to use too strong language, but it is, it's dishonest of us to have an infrastructural system like our water and sewer system, no different from our water and sewer system, and to pay for those things with property taxes and to hide the cost and to never fully be able to fund that work. And that's why I think this is an absolutely fine proposal in terms of creating a utility. Everything after that is detail work in my mind. I really do believe that pulling this from the general fund is the responsible thing to do, because as it's part of the general fund, we never discuss it. We don't have a mandate or an opportunity to talk about what we're investing, how what we're investing is attributed to each person and what each homeowner and property owner is paying for their stormwater utility. So I think pulling this out is really important. I'm a bit intrigued by Mr. Taylor's reference of the high cost of the fine. There is no language related to the fine in this ordinance. However, I'm sorry?
After Mr. Mold's comments this evening that it was the department's intent to use that as a collection method, I disagree, and I would recommend that language be struck from this draft.
Okay.
In a way, I guess I was failing to see the sort of distinction between the garbage ordinance, where we're really fining people for not doing what they're supposed to do with their garbage, and I assumed that was intended to pick up similar violations here, but actually in thinking about it now, I don't see how those would occur unless we identify things that people have to comply with that they fail to comply with. For example, if someone failed to provide information that was requested of them, then we should be able to fine them. But
if a particular, and I don't mean to interrupt,
No.
if for example a particular best management practice was required by everyone in
exactly, and they fail to comply, that's what I thought where we were trying to go with this. But if it's for purposes of collection, I think that we'd be better off to stick with that it be billed quarterly and made part of the city water and sewer bill and collected in the same manner as those bills. That's
right.
where I think that it should be.
I agree. And if you fail to pay your water and sewer bill, and if you fail to pay your garbage bill or your utility bill, there is a consequence. And I would think that the consequence should be the same as if you didn't pay your water and sewer bill.
Right. So that I don't really. It's certainly the inclusion of this in here today. It was certainly not my intent that be used as a collection method, and it should not be.
Okay. So, and I apologize for, I'm still going. I truly believe that a piece of the purpose and the use of the funds should be for grants. I've been reading about this in other communities, and grants back to the property owners to implement some of these best practices. In other communities, it's been 10% of the funds collected. In still other communities, 20% of the funds collected. But what I'd like to see is that some portion of those funds go back to helping people get a credit and get a waiver. At the end of the day, if everybody's capturing what they can on their property, then the fee assessed can be minimal or nil. I think we'll always have to collect some fee to maintain our infrastructure. That's our responsibility, of course. Just like our roads, just like our pipes for water and sewer. So I think that's important. But I'd like to see us provide those grants back to all property owners. Allowable applicants for those grants would be all property owners, as well as homeowner associations and neighborhood associations that present a plan for dispersing those funds to the members of their association so that they can implement best management practices.
Are you saying a grant system rather than a credit system?
Nope. In addition to.
I don't know how the numbers work on that.
They do it in every other scenario. They do it in every other county-based scenario. The idea is 10% of the collected funds, whatever is collected in a given year, is made available for application to implement best management practices for capital costs and labor costs. So I could, as a property owner, say, oh, you're gonna give me a credit if I put in a rain barrel, in future years? Well, I want to apply for a grant based on the investments I've made thus far into the Stormwater Utility Fund to get the $55 rain barrel or whatever it may be. Or
10%
the
is the part I was missing. You're capping that at 10% for the grants. So
Some
that makes more
communities
sense.
capped it at 10, some communities capped it at 20.
Still, there's a cap. You're not.
Right.
I'm like.
No, because we still have to,
We
still have to take
projects
care
to
of
do.
our infrastructure and.
Right.
Exactly. But I believe strongly that there's a provision there that offers us something. Another thing that most other communities included that we didn't in our ordinance is a Stormwater Advisory Committee that advises, identifies challenges, works toward the fair assessment, and that includes business owners, homeowners, the faith community, environmental community, real estate community, all on that Stormwater Advisory Committee. I'd like to see us include that language. And I think it only contributes to a more fair conversation at the end of the day.
I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm not agreeing with any of it. And I'll tell you why. On line 38 and 42, whereas manager of the stormwater system to protect the public health, safety, and welfare requires that adequate revenues be generated to provide funding for the operation, improvement, maintenance, and monitoring of the stormwater system. And whereas it is in the interest of the public to finance the stormwater system adequately with a user charge that is reasonable and deemed by the city to be equitable so that each user of the system pays to the extent to which each user contributes to the need for it. Well, I sit here representing poor people. Some of them are property owners, some of them are not property owners. I know in Social Security, they got a raise of $20 for senior citizen, their Social Security check. If we do, say, a $20 fee, $5 a quarter, that's their $20 that they received in their Social Security benefits. I understand perfectly about the stormwater system, and we have aging pipes and all this, but it's just another fee to the public. And I don't know if we even educated the public, because I talk to regular folks. They saying this is just another fee that we're putting on, like they said, we're already paying the flush tax. Now we're putting a stormwater fee on them. They do not understand, and I don't fully understand, why we have to charge another fee. I agree with Matt, if we're gonna do this, be fair and equitable, if everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, I agree with that part of it. But how about the regular folks? How about the people that live in the senior housing? How is that fee gonna be passed on to them? The apartment complexes, how is that gonna be passed on to them? Because some people are not gonna be honest. Will they get to see the bill from their apartment? No, the bill does not come to the people that rent the apartment, it comes to the property owner. So they won't see the water bill, they're only told. I'm fortunate enough to see my water bill, but some people may not see their water bill. So how is this gonna be fair to those folks that we're dealing with? I agree that businesses should not have, if they're doing everything they're supposed to comply with and all that, they should have the proper credit or whatever. But I'm dealing with regular people now, they're not in business, and how you sell this and get the support of the folks, because everybody in the community are not environmentalists because they feel that the Chesapeake Bay will never be cleaned up. This is what I hear. They know the importance of it, but they feel that it'll never be cleaned up. They're also saying, why didn't Delaware and Pennsylvania contribute to the pollution of the bay? These are comments I've heard. Down McDonald's, why is this fee, why are they being charged with this fee? And that's the bottom line. You have to give justification when you're asking people to pay this money. Now, we understand, I like the clean water, I like all that, but we have regular people out here they don't come to meetings, they don't go to environmental meetings. They need to understand why we need this fee, and then on top of that, infractions. So what you gonna do? What are you gonna do with that? That scared me, you can't cut storm water off, so what you gonna cut off when you don't pay the bill? That's what are they gonna cut off? I said, what are they gonna cut off? They have a flooding area. I
That's
just
fine.
left a flooded
I'm
area.
gonna come cork your gut.
That's fine.
Something, I said, well, how can they get back at the person that don't pay the fee? That's what, I was trying to figure that one out. So when I said the public to finance this, but how have we done our due diligence, I use your word, to educate the public on this fee? Not the business community, because the business community has a support system with the chamber. Have you educated the public on this fee and the importance of it? Because you're dealing with, we got a senior citizen community, a large senior citizen community that needs to be educated on why this fee is. When you have people choosing between their medication and food, how can I justify, and that's the people I deal with every day. I deal with those people every day, and that's my question. And I do think that, I'm not saying not to pass it, but we need to clean it up and get an understanding from some people. When we say hardship, there's got to be some exemption somewhere for people who cannot afford to pay these bills as it is. And I think we need to look at it. If you have, and I hate going back to work session. No, it's not my favorite thing.
I know it's not.
Everybody knows that.
May I,
Yeah.
Ms. Shields, there's, so another piece of language that I would like to see added, which I think speaks in part to what you're talking about, is under 13.30.040 purposes of fund. There are at least 3 additions, maybe 4, that I'd like to see added. One would be to add to the language about engineering, design, and debt service in terms of the use of the funds, would be to add planning, mapping, and impervious surface assessment to that.
Which section was that? I'm sorry.
13.30.040. I have this all in a different, separate document, separate Word document, so, from the language itself. I'll keep going. The other thing I would add is public education, outreach, and web presence relating to stormwater management, stream and wetland restoration. Because I think you're right, public education on this is critical. And that's actually what we heard from Mayor Williams from Berlin when he came to talk to us. He talked about how important it was to educate the public. And you know, he talked about the fallacy, excuse me, he talked about, you know, what they perceive to be, you know, their mistake in not doing enough education, you know, from the get-go. C, I would add grants to property owners, homeowners associations, neighborhood associations to implement best practices as outlined in the later section that I've started to write. And then D, you know, I'd like to see some relationship between this and some goals related to tree planting, canopy cover, you know, things like that, or urban tree canopy, things throughout the city. But at the very least, those first 3, you know, adding impervious surface assessment and mapping, adding public education and outreach and a web presence, and adding the grants to property owners, neighborhood associations, and homeowners associations to the purpose of the fund. You know, I'd also add, to me, you know, you talked about some of the macro issues, and we heard in some of the comments some of the macro issues. You know, to me, this has nothing to do with the state of Maryland. This has nothing to do with the state of Maryland. This has nothing to do with the Chesapeake Bay. As much as, you know, I love the bay and I love boating and I love hunting on the bay too. But that's not what this is about. We have a utility, a piece of public infrastructure, a system, and we aren't taking care of it because we can't afford to take care of it. And we've been told by larger funders, including the federal government, that the way to get money is to show us that you're making a contribution, to show that you have a dedicated fund. Okay, well, that's a piece of it. The other is to actually have a community conversation about what we are paying for our utility. And that's why I support pulling it out as a utility rather than having it in our property taxes, which I think is just a wishy-washy way to address this. And that's, you know, why I think it's a useful tool. So I understand what you're saying. I think that's a useful addition. I think that's one of the things that we should do is amend the language about purposes of the fund to include that. Ms. Cohen?
Thank you. I have some of the same concerns my colleague, Mrs. Shields, has regarding funds, because I know people who are struggling to hold on to their houses, and they're working poor, and they're working between the 2 of them, 3 jobs to support their family. And $20 for a lot of people in this town is much. For them, it's 4 days of heat through the cold winter that we had. 4 to 7, depending on how low they keep the thermostat. I think that's an important consideration. What I'm hearing, this was one of my concerns when we had first reading, and I voted for it because, there was a lot of discussion about, we can get issues resolved within 60 days. I don't think we can. This is really complicated stuff. It really is not simple and should be absolutely done right. I don't think we should pass a law that's not right and then try to fix it later. I think we work to get a good law and then pass it. Regarding the debate of general fund versus utility, one of the points that I made at first reading was that it does provide some additional transparency to the public. But I think that's got to be within the context of what's going on with the budget. One of the things that I had suggested was that this needs to be done within the context of our budget. We have the certified numbers from state on our tax base. I think as of February 15th, it's online. And right now, our constant yield rate shows a little over a penny's increase in our tax rate. It goes up for Wycomico as well. Our assessable base is down $25 million. That's better than the $45 million they were predicting last year, but it's still down for this year, which means unless we adjust something, the tax rate is going to go up. In that respect, Mr. Taylor would be correct, but I think when it's done in the right way, in the right circumstance, it doesn't look like to the public, oh, you just cleared out that pot in the general fund and moved it over to this utility so that you can raise stuff and not raise our taxes and then everybody's good for the election. I don't want to have that kind of a discussion clouding this. What we're talking about is what is the best way to fund the infrastructure, as Mr. Day said. And yes, it is about the Chesapeake Bay and our rivers and our environment because as Lucas pointed out, it was built to move water. It wasn't made to clean it. In fact, with our previous Public Works Director, I'd never heard anything back on this, but I had suggested that we look into the modest little units of solar aerators that they're using at the Lincoln Park Zoo, which bubbles the water and moves the duck poop up to the surface where the UV rays can help disinfect it. $672 a unit. I called Lincoln Park Zoo. They've had some success with that. They did have a period of algae bloom, but he said it was because of something in their municipal water system, which I think is just like scary. There are a lot of things that we can do. And I don't really mind creating some sort of a dedicated fund, but I think it does need to be in the context of a couple of things. One, I'd like the General Assembly to finish their work. Because if they're going to make decisions about things like whether or not these can be applied to nonprofits, it's hard to say to churches and very small nonprofits that have little offices here that they're going to pay additional stuff when we give them tax breaks as it is. But at the same time, they do contribute to what goes into the water system. But where we really get hit is when we're looking at very large institutions, our schools, our university, our hospital, where we pay in for the services that we get from those institutions. And yet, if they were to not have to pay anything into this, that would make a huge difference. And one of my concerns is we've been talking credits and grants and grants and credits, and I'm going, well, where's the money? And who's going to pay it? And I'm really, really worried that it's going to be, once again, the little guy and the little gal. Mr. and Mrs. Salisbury in this room didn't go out and pollute the Chesapeake Bay. You could say maybe we did because we bought the products of corporations that did, but, we didn't go and dump our sewer lines out there. You bought a home on a city water and sewer system. And I just worry with all the talk about all the breaks for this and breaks for that. When so-and-so bought their home 40 years ago and in an older part of town and it's completely surrounded by grass, they're not gushing large quantities of pollutants into our stormwater system. I don't want to see it wind up to where they're going to wind up carrying the brunt of this. They shouldn't have to. Now, the people and the businesses who came here years ago helped build this community too, not just the ones who arrived recently. I too want to see equitable and fairness, but I don't want it to be so bending backwards for what was complying with whatever the new law was. Those people complied 40 years ago. Those people complied 30 years ago. Those people complied 20 years ago, and other people complied 5 years ago, because that's what the law was.
Well,
I do
sorry.
think, Mr. Day, that this should go back to work session. It is an important issue for many reasons: fiscal, environmental, procedural, and I think it really is important that we do it within the context of the budget to see what we're looking at for this year and coming up. We're talking about having a goal-setting session April 10th. I'm a little confused as to how that will help with the budget process 5 days away from when the budget has to be presented, when I think the figures had to be in about the end of February. But I couldn't, I wouldn't be able to support this tonight the way it's written. I really, truly wouldn't. And that would kill me, because being like I said, the lifelong little environmentalist, hi Mom, working on water quality issues back when I was young, I want to see, if we're going to do this, that we do it well. The environment and the people that we serve deserve no less than that.
I agree. I just think the one thing that I'd add there is that it's important to me that not only those who complied with the most recent stormwater design standards that the state has applied be available or able to get a credit, but that every property owner be able to get a credit for implementing best management practices on their property. That was just one small subset. The 2010 design standards would just be one small subset of a reason to get a waiver.
I think Mr. Mold's suggestion about using it as an incentive, and it might not be something, this is where how we structure the fee is really important, because it may not be that we have something that is just logistically unmanageable, where you get something every year, but where the base is determined, and then anything that you do above and beyond, there's a one-time, for example, you want to get a rain barrel. Okay, so there will be a $25 credit that year or whatever so that you can get a rain barrel, or whatever it comes out to be. But I mean, we have an awful lot of open issues that we've discussed. You did a laundry list.
Mhm.
Mr. Drew brought in some. There were very good suggestions from the public. Like I said, Mrs. Shields' concerns, I think, are valid. I don't feel like we really resolved the issue of, how's it going to be handled for multifamily rentals versus, a single-family home rental, and what happens when they don't see the bill, and, do we want to handle it as a real estate lien the way that we do other things? I mean, can you imagine somebody losing their home over not paying their $20 a year stormwater fee? When you pay the bill, you don't say, I'm paying just the water, or I'm paying just the sewer. You pay the bill, or you just come up short. And, I don't know what finance is doing now, but there are programs where you pay in installments, but basically if it's not paid, you get your water turned off. We don't want to create a cycle where people are chasing the fines and fees and turn-ons and connections, and then what you have is poor people who are getting even poorer because they just can't keep the water turned on because we've got an extra fee on. So, I think that everyone has the best intention here. We want to be able to execute this in a way that doesn't create a whole lot of really ugly unintended consequences. The other thing is that, a number of members of the business community have told us that they really support this, with credits, of course. Some of the members of the business community have also told us the more you put on here, the less competitive we're going to be with Wycomico, who's not participating. The less competitive we're going to be with Sussex County, who's not doing that. The less competitive we're going to be with other neighboring counties that aren't doing it. that's a consideration we have to keep in mind when we've got an assessable base that's down $25 million certified by the state.
I should note that last I heard from the administration, and I know we'll get a report from this, was that it's actually up. The assessable base is up. Yeah, not down.
It was up slightly the last time it was reported to me. Mr. Recorder is in the room.
Okay, I'm just going
We
to
don't know
what's
yet.
online
Sure.
as of
Sure.
mid-February.
Let's just say we don't know at this point.
Well, you know, I'm a little cautious about that. I mean, when do we have a definitive amount from the state? Because they say that this is their certified number, so I took
remember.
it at their word.
I don't remember when we got it last year.
Mr. Day?
Yes, Mr. Speed.
While I agree conceptually with this program, I think if we pulled the wagon out of the barn at this point, the wheels are going to fall off. So therefore, I move that we take this back to work session.
I second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. I imagine there's going to be some discussion, but I'm going to contribute to that. Just to go back for a moment, and this, I'll try to keep this as to the point as I can, to Ms. Cohen's point about Wycomico and Sussex County. You know, I have some questions about when this goes into effect and whether or not it should go into effect when the area is right around the city, potentially with you know, area that is actually flowing into city water and city stormwater system is not subject to the same fee. Is it another incentive for people to build outside of the city rather than to build in the city? You know, I think that's one of the things that we've got to discuss here. I also think there have been great points brought up about the, and Mr. Spees, you've mentioned this before, about the pass-through to a tenant of a multifamily unit, and whether or not, you know, that should be capped, or finding a way to provide evidence that it's no more than one ERU per unit per annum. I think that's a valuable concern. Yeah, I absolutely agree in principle with this thing. I think it's great. I think you know, we've got to take care of our infrastructure. I apologize to Mr. Molds and Ms. Pollock for the work that you and your staff have put in, and for hitting the pause button if we do tonight. And you know, I'm personally supportive of tabling it or taking it to work session, excuse me, and for doing this so late in the game. But I've been investing a lot of time personally, obviously, in making my laundry list, and hadn't done that sooner. And again, for that, I apologize. You know, I think it is late in the game to be doing that, but at the same time, I think, like Mr. Spees said, getting this thing out of the barn without the everything bolted on tight may cause the wheels to come off. So I'd like to see us address these issues. I'd like to work with our attorney to craft the notes that I have into language that could withstand the test of the courts and et cetera, rather than just my thoughts on paper. I'd like to see all this incorporated up front. I'd like to see us do it quickly. I am concerned because I think we're coming up on the end of the 60-day window soon. You know, we've been pushed back several times as a result of the weather. If we were to bring this to work session and then back to legislative session, would we be outside of the 60-day window? Mr. Thomas? February. When did we start? February 10th?
You'd be looking at about April 11, I think.
So what would be the procedure then for addressing an amended version of this ordinance?
Have to start over.
Start
First
over?
reading.
Mr. Day, I think that's worthwhile. You
I'm
know,
not saying it's not.
I did warn, you know, that was my concern in voting yes at first reading. I don't think that this should be determined. I mean, I realize that we want to do it in a reasonable time frame, but like I said, this is a big deal. This is not a simplistic little bill. It has a lot of complications. You talked about wanting to, and I agree with this wholeheartedly because I get the same thing, educating the public and bringing them into the discussion so that this isn't a war of partisan rhetoric that filters down from the national level, which we have had way too much of in
Hear,
the
hear.
city. So, you know, if it takes us another couple of months to make it happen, we should do that. Let's do it well. If we start, you know, if it starts with July 15th of next year instead of January 15th, okay, well, that'll still be within our budget cycle. So we can do that. You know, my point at first reading was that the seriousness is obviously here and should not be doubted by the administration. So I think the more information that Public Works can keep gathering in the process of assessing the impervious surface in town, the mapping and so on, that's only going to make it better and possibly make it possible for us with this ordinance to be a lot more specific. Because the thing that we heard at the coffee with council in February was, even from people who support doing this, was they said, you know, there's a lot of vagaries still here, and I still don't understand this, and I still don't understand that. Let's give it the time that it deserves and do it well, because any job worth doing is worth doing well.
Right. Well, and I asked that question not to rush this. I asked that question just to understand and what the process would be. And as I said, I'm supportive of the concept. I haven't had a single person email, call, write that isn't supportive of the concept, but they want to see the details. And airing the details, I think, and getting them in there now is the appropriate way to handle this. So I'm very supportive of getting there. I just want to see us get it all in there and get it right. And I think there's a bunch of things to add personally in the meantime.
Yeah.
Ms. Mitchell.
I agree, there are a lot of unanswered questions here. There were, when we had first reading, we brought up, before we even had Mr. Drew's first email, I had concerns that I'd heard from developers and not just developers, but people who had built their own homes and their own properties with accommodations, and developers that had built centers to standards that exist now, not being charged at the same rate as people who built without any of those accommodations for stormwater management. I thought 75% was a little high. I was leaning more towards 50, but again, that's another unanswered question. And one of the reasons that we moved forward and that I was convinced to move forward at first reading was the concern that we were potentially missing out on grant money, on opportunities for grant money by not setting the frame of the building and then going in and doing the walls. And I'm just curious for Mr. Molds or Ms. Pollack maybe where we are, what this does if we don't get this done until July 1st, or we don't get this, how much are we missing? What are we missing? Is our intent to do this, the fact that we've done first reading and that we're actively working on it, enough to put us in the running for some of those grant monies and opportunities we were talking about, or do we have to have the fund established in order to apply for those?
How much will it cost to stimulate the state or the feds to?
Right, how far do you have to go before they say, okay, you're serious?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a subjective determination by the people given the grant. One of our concerns has been with the idea of getting this implemented January 1st was all the legwork we've got to do in terms of calculating the impervious area. And I think the first reading, there was consensus, I think, from council to continue to proceed in that measure to develop that data. But as far as being able to tell you whether that's going to affect a grant or not, again, that's the regulators that have the money purse strings.
But you're not waiting for this to pass before you start that process?
No, we
Those
keep applying for
calculations,
grants. I mean, where a grant is available that we can go after, we're going to do it.
I mean, the mapping and the
Matter of fact, we got confirmation from ESRGC about their scope of work and everything, just in an email today. So, no, we're continuing that process.
Okay, so that's moving forward.
Yes.
So there's potential consequence for not laying the foundation or framing the building, or whichever way you want to say it, but we can't say for certain that we are missing opportunities. I would like to be kept apprised if we're getting feedback if we're applying for grants and they're saying, no, you don't have an ordinance in place and this isn't happening, I don't want to miss those opportunities. I want to get out in front of everyone else that's going to come online when the second grade of permits comes on, cities of our side. There's going to be a lot more competition for those grant funds. I want to get out ahead of that. But I too would rather pass this as we want it than halfway, half measure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be fair to this subject, which has a lot to it and which deserves our time and attention. However, we've got 6 more items and a closed session, and it's already 8:30. So in the interest of time and really being attentive to all of the items we have ahead of us and trying to contribute the time and attention those items deserve, I'd like us to go ahead and vote on the amendment, on the motion that was offered to take this back to work session. I think we've got a lot to discuss, and I think most of it can be discussed there.
I think it should probably be its own work session.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
And we can do that as a special work session. We'll figure that out after this meeting, but I'd like to call the question on the item. All those in favor of bringing this back to work session, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Is there any opposed?
No, I voted.
Abstention?
Well, it's
Okay.
just
everyone-
delayed.
I didn't hear it. That's all good. All right. So this item will move back to work session, and we will schedule and advertise a public work session, of course, public work session, but it may be a special work session to discuss the issue. I appreciate everyone's input and your time. And again, personally, for bringing my list up late to you, Mr. Moles, Ms. Pollock, I apologize. I think it would have been more fair to do this earlier, but frankly, I've just invested a lot of time in the last 2 days to writing and getting my thoughts together. But we thank you and your staff for everything you've put into this. All right, next item on the agenda is ordinance number 2279 for second reading. This is the budget amendment to the 2014 Fire Department budget to transfer insurance funds received. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 2279?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Cohen. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Ms. Mitchell. All right, Mr. Tillman.
All right, this is the second reading of this ordinance to amend the budget as a result of insurance revenues received. This is for repairs performed on Tower 16, Engine 16, Ambulance A1, and Ambulance 16-1. The proposal is that $20,575.11 in insurance proceeds were received, and the request is for an increase in the general fund revenue insurance proceeds account 01000456993 by $20,575.11, and an increase in the fire department's expense vehicles account 24035-534308 by $16,093.97, and an increase in the fire department's expense equipment repairs account 24035-534302 by $4,481.14.
Any questions for Mr. Tillman? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2279, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you all very much. Next on our agenda is ordinance number 2280 for first reading. This is approving a budget amendment also for the FY 2014 Fire Department budget to transfer funds to account for turnout gear from the city's general fund surplus. Is there?
So moved.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cohen, is there a second?
Yes, there is.
Mr. Spees, thank you very much. Mr. Tillman.
All right, this is one of those revised budget ordinances that I gave you before the meeting started, 2280, an ordinance of the City of Salisbury approving a budget amendment of the FY 2014 Fire Department budget to transfer funds from the city's general fund surplus to the fire department's turnout gear account. Whereas the City of Salisbury Fire Department has successfully recruited more volunteer and career members during 2014, whereas each new member received appropriate personal protective equipment, where turnout gear is part of that protective envelope, and whereas the turnout gear is part of the PPE cost for each member. And whereas the City of Salisbury, in accordance with NFPA 1851, Section 10.1.2, which directs that structural firefighting ensembles and ensemble elements shall be retired in accordance with 10.2.1 no more than 10 years from the date the ensembles or ensemble elements were manufactured, must retire several items that have reached or surpassed their usable life. The city desires to remain compliant with the generally accepted industry standards and protect its firefighters, and the city has the need to replace 12 coats, 5 pants, 26 coats and used since 2004, and 26 coats and 38 pants that were purchased in 2005, all of which are either currently in need of replacement or will need to be replaced in FY15. Whereas the cost of the turnout gear for 2014 will equal $22,090.80 and will exceed the 2014 budget, and whereas the cost of the turnout, the first one was the PPE turnout gear replacements for 2014, and whereas the cost of the PPE turnout replacements for 2015 will equal $49,272 and is more than the FY15 budget request. Now therefore be ordained by the City of Salisbury that there be an increase in and the language changes here because the initial accounts were just inaccurately described. Increase the current year surplus account, which is by $35,000, and that's account number 01000469810, and increase the fire department's turnout gear account 24035-534302 by an equivalent $35,000.
Okay, a couple of questions on this. One question anyway. The amount being attributed this year, I'm just wondering, we're not going to see this in every year, this sort of budget amendment. Can you explain what happened this year, Mr. Stevens?
Chief Toll.
Chief. Evening.
How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
John Toll, Deputy Chief of the Department. No, you shouldn't see this every year. The problem that we had is our gear is purchased in thirds over a 3-year time period, and then its lifespan is 10 years. So for every 10 years, we have to budget an increase in our turnout account because we have to buy so many sets of turnout gear. Well, in FY13, we were able to encumber money from FY12 to buy the ones that had to be replaced in FY13, the increased amount than normal. In FY14, during budget preparations, we had asked for an increase in our operating account for turnout gear. We were told to maintain the budget, try to use gear that we had in supply, and to see if we could maintain that budget for that year. Well, unfortunately, we haven't been able to do it because of recruitment drives. We brought in 16 new volunteers, and unfortunately, not everyone's cut the same, so it's not like we can have one size fits all. We have to special order gear, and we can't have gear on shelves because if you buy gear and it sits on a shelf, you're losing the service life in it, right? Because you only get 10 years. So that's why we had to look at this budget amendment for this year.
So the amount budgeted per year essentially is 1/3 of the cost of the equipment, 1/3 of the fire department's turnout gear in a given year. So in 3 years, you've replaced the entire stock essentially.
Yes, and what happens is in the budget for those years where we're not buying the large amount, we have money there in case someone's gear gets destroyed. They go out on a call, petroleum products all over it, gets ripped, burned, or whatever. So we have that maintenance in our budget to buy certain sets of gear. And then when we get to the 10-year lifespan, we have to see an increase in our turnout gear account to buy the 1/3, the 1/3, and the 1/3 over a 3-year time period.
So I guess here's my question. I'm wondering if, and it really doesn't pertain to this budget amendment because I think, I understand why this budget amendment is necessary, but in future years, should we be increasing our contribution by 10% to every year, if it's, or not, and I don't mean year on year, just 10%
Right.
overall, so that we are capturing those funds and maybe buying another piece or two of turnout gear so that we are always staying ahead of the curve or with the curve on a decade cycle?
Well, you would have to do it in a 3-year period, because again, you can't go out and buy the gear to have it just sit
Right.
on a shelf.
Okay.
Because you lose that lifespan of it. I mean, it's only 10 years, so.
Right, okay.
I was just saying the clock starts when you buy it. so
Exactly.
it's
Or not when we
well,
buy it, but when it's made.
When it's made,
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
right, but I mean, so, not first time you put it on, then it starts now.
That's correct.
I did have a little bit of question about, why we're doing an FY14 budget amendment to cover costs that weren't allowed to be put in the FY15 budget. That's how I'm reading this, is that the cost in FY15, the replacements for FY15 will equal $49,272, and is more than the FY15 budget request. That says to me, you were told to hold your budget flat for FY15, but you need additional, so either we do the budget amendment now for 14 and 15, or we're gonna see another budget amendment in 15.
That's accurate. If the directive was to keep that line flat, if we don't find another way to fund that turnout gear for FY15, then it's likely that we would be back as it stands today. If the council saw fit to fund all of it and let them make that purchase, that would be fine.
But is this turnout gear that you need now, or is this turnout gear that you're gonna encumber in 14 to hold over to buy in 15 when you need it?
We need a certain set amount. I'd have to, there's a certain amount that we need right now, and it's, I can find it real quick.
$22,090.80 is the portion for FY14.
14, we would have to buy in, now let me get this right. We have to buy 12 coats and 5 pair of pants now. And then FY15, we have to buy the additional 26 coats and 38 pair of pants.
Mr. Cordry, is that accurate? Is what would have to happen is that the money would be put into the FY14 budget from the surplus, and then have to be encumbered and carry that encumbrance over to FY15 for when they have to buy the remaining equipment?
Well, generally, you would need to have a commitment to a vendor for it to be encumbered. You should have. It should be ordered from the vendor. So you guys be ready to have it on order by the end of the year?
Yes.
I don't understand how you're ordering.
Do you have money in the FY14 budget right now to buy the 12 coats and 5 pair of pants?
No, we have about $3,000 left.
Okay, how much do you need for that purchase?
The 22,000.
All right, with all due respect, we're 2 weeks away from getting presented the budget, or 3 weeks, actually. You know, and I would prefer to keep FY15 and FY15, and it may turn out that we don't need to take surplus to do the request for FY15. Once council looks at the budget, there may be room to move to the tune of $27,000. It just seems to me that if you need some money to get turnout gear that's needed right now out of FY14, then we could do a budget amendment for that, but anything dealing with FY15, let's just deal with it in the budget.
Just a correction, it's 7,000, because the total is 35, 22 of it's for 14, the remainder. The
No.
49,000 you're seeing is the total for 15 that's been budgeted. So it's
Okay.
35,000.
Yeah, I see it down
22
here.
is for now.
I actually thought that was a typo in there,
I made
so.
that same error.
You know, I just think muddying up the fiscal years.
We worked hard to clean up a lot of those old hanging purchase orders. I really
So,
don't want.
I guess the question is, I know the budget's being developed, and what comes from the fire department and the fire department's budget to the mayor's office? You know, I wonder, does that adequately account for what's needed to be purchased in.
I have a problem with that.
And I know that may be difficult to answer tonight, but it should, I guess is the argument.
When the fire department presented its budget based on the directive, we were not aware that this turnout gear was needed. So that's why it's a little confusing right now.
But we can address that in the budgeting process.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
I'll make a motion to amend the amounts on lines 41 and 43 to $22,090.80.
Is there a second?
Second.
Third.
All right, any discussion on the matter?
No.
I just have one question, Chief Tull. I just want to make sure that that does afford you, just before we vote on it, that does afford you the ability to purchase the needed equipment today.
That allows us to purchase what we need in this budget, yes.
Right, okay. And then we can address next year in a
You
few
said you had
weeks.
3,000 in the budget.
Yeah, we have 3,000.
So that
3,000 left.
3,000, so where did 35,000 come from?
That's the.
That was the number that we requested to purchase all the gear that we had left to purchase, and then to have funds
Some
sitting
left
there
over.
that if, God forbid, a catastrophic event happened, and we had to go out and replace 6 sets of gear,
Okay.
we would have money there to buy it without
Yeah,
having to
Okay, wait.
Okay, I got
come
you.
back to
Wait a
council.
minute. That's a little bit different. So if we do this for 22,000, the 3,000 you have, it's gonna wipe out that account. If you have somebody destroy turnout gear between now and July 1st, we're looking at doing another budget amendment.
Yeah, because we would have no funds available to purchase any new gear.
Okay, but that's a little different
But I
than
thought
the way it
spares
was.
were part, when we were budgeting before, one of the things we said was, do you buy to have, spares in case something gets damaged during servicing a fire? Now,
Well, they can't because the lifespan starts the 10-year lifespan. So if it sat there as a spare for 5 years, then we're only getting 5
but
years
they
use out of it.
typically,
We buy spare uniforms as the shirt that I buy and the pants that I have on and that kind of stuff, but turnout gear, we don't buy spare to have it sitting there because the life of it, we can't have it sitting there for a year and a half and lose that service life of it.
Understood.
Okay,
But,
well-
but if 22,000 were appropriated today, in addition to the 3,000 very small cushion that exists, there would be funding to maybe purchase one or two?
No.
No?
One.
One,
Because
okay,
if it's,
one.
$2,600 is what it costs to outfit one firefighter.
Okay. Well, I know I personally, if we move forward at this number, I personally would be comfortable if there was a catastrophic incident that damaged, turnout gear in between now and July 1, I would personally be comfortable, absolutely comfortable with a budget amendment coming back, requesting to replace one or two.
The problem is the time it takes to do that. If that uniform, it's custom fit,
It needs
if it's
35 then.
destroyed, they need to order it
They
immediately
needed
and not wait.
35,000 then.
So with that in mind, I have the $7,000 in there for cushion, that's what, 2.5 uniforms or
Okay.
turnout gears. That I'm okay with, but I would like to see the language about FY15 just
Taken
struck, I was gonna say the same thing.
So I will amend with the, I
Second.
don't know who seconded it.
I second it.
To leave the amounts on line 41 and 43 at 35,000 and strikes lines 35 and 36 altogether.
Okay. So the amounts stay, and we're striking line 35 and 36 altogether.
Correct, I apologize, that was a different understanding.
Understood.
Second time around.
3 fingers.
All right. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please signify your support by saying aye.
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 The chair votes aye. Okay. To the broader question, any other discussion?
Is there anything else we need to amend in there to ease the confusion on this? 'Cause,
There is
there's
another
the
remark
26
about,
coats and the 38 pants. I guess that explanation still fits.
yeah,
but, I
it
mean,
does. There is another mention of FY15, but
I,
it's not
I,
regarding.
I would like to say in all of this that it's really important, and I know that, Mr. Stevenson, if you could carry this back to the mayor. I know it's desirable to try to, have a budget with certain constraints and have it equal across the departments and all that. but it is really difficult for this council to work on a budget when the needs are not properly expressed. If we don't know what's truly needed. You know, years ago, we had the issue of the supplemental budget that was hiding in the background. We don't need to go back to that sort of thing. You know, we need to see what the request is, we need to see what's approved, and if the full request wasn't met, what was the rationale? But what winds up happening is we wind up doing, you know, budget amendments out of surplus, and, you know, it's one thing if you plan to do that, because you're trying to hold a particular tax rate, but you know it's likely to come down the pike. I just feel that we really honestly need to know what the needs are for funding, and if that means that something has to change in the course of deliberations, then something has to change.
Well, a couple of years ago, we got a surprise bonus of $100,000 from our insurance. And then we were like, okay, well, there's a million places we could use it, but there were a lot of needs that had been left out of the budget that we didn't know about, and then they all popped up. And then we had about 300,000 in requests. So it would be really nice to know what's requested or have that list of needs in addition to the balanced budget that's presented.
Especially if we're talking about something that is life-preserving, like turnout gear.
Sure.
I mean, that was something we said years ago. Turnout gear radios, they've got to have them. We got to keep them safe. We don't want to lose anybody in the line of duty. You know, we cannot be tight on those types of things.
I think we'll all have to council will have to remain vigilant when this FY15 budget comes forward to make sure that the fire department is getting everything it needs with respect to life-saving equipment. Mr.
Duly
Stevenson?
noted, and would just like to share that if the directive, for example, is to hold the line, so to speak, on operating expenses, what have you, we do afford the opportunity for the department to advance a critical needs memo if they, for example, need money for turnout gear, what have you. I think this is just an unusual circumstance because you ended up needing more gear
Yes.
all of a sudden because of change of personnel. So that's why we find ourselves in this situation.
Okay.
But I will certainly carry that back to the mayor.
Thank you.
Councilman McGowan.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Tell. So, to the amended ordinance 2280, all those in favor, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Okay, ordinance 2281 for second reading. This is amending the.
Excuse me, could I just be clear, have we voted on both the amendment and the general ordinance as amended?
Yes, we did. Both,
Thank you.
both passed unanimously. The ordinance 2281, amending chapter 15.24, the housing of the city code, housing standards. Entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2281.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Shields. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Cohen, thank you. Mr. Tillman.
All right, this is the second reading of this ordinance. It's been out there for some time now. At the last first reading, we were supposed to add back there between lines 29 and 31 language that the board would include at least one homeowner and at least one tenant. Since that first reading and the council's consideration of that, it occurred to me that we might have someone buy a home who was a tenant or someone who owned a home become a tenant. And so I've added the language at the time of any new appointment. There would be at least one homeowner and one tenant so that they could fill any gaps. I assumed you didn't want to displace a member of the board who bought a home. So, but that's the only change from what was previously discussed.
I'm comfortable with that. Okay. Any other questions or?
Does that need to be amended?
Oh, yeah, that was a language that you added. Mr.
Right,
Tillman.
and that language would just be, at the time of any new appointment would be the amendment. But, so I would recommend that lines 29 and 31.
I move the amendment of lines 29 and 30 with, I'm sorry, does it go to 31?
Yes.
Sorry, it was off my screen. 29 through 31 be amended with the yellow highlights as advocated by the city attorney.
Is there a second?
Yes, there is.
So it reads, and at the time of any new appointment, the city shall ensure that the board includes at least one homeowner and at least one tenant. Period.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay. And
Could I ask a
any
question?
further discussion? Yes, Ms. Cohen.
We had during this discussion before, the concept of limiting so that at no time shall the board include more than one member. I don't remember the exact language that was brought to us before, but it was something along the lines of, at no time shall the board include more than one member who owns or has equitable interest in real property within the city for the purposes of investment or income production beyond their principal residence. The idea being to limit commercial influence in decisions.
That was also at the time that we had the language in there that it would include a landlord or realtor.
Right, but the concept still stands that without some kind of language doing that, that you could end up with 5 resident landlords on your housing board.
Or representatives
Four.
thereof.
4. You would still have a renter.
Who could be a landlord.
That's actually true. You're right. You're right.
So,
Would be an unusual situation.
I'm not trying to pick on the landlords, I'm just saying that this has been a source of contention for a really long time, and that was actually suggested by the administration previously as one way, and I think Mr. Pickett brought it up, as one way of alleviating that issue.
I think there should be language to address that, to tell the truth, yes.
You know, we want, basically just average folks here on the housing board, I think was the idea of different walks of life and not there through, an
still can be through.
investment motivation.
They still can be through. I mean, just because you don't have a landlord on it, don't mean they're not gonna have you sympathize with the landlords. So, I mean, when you're gonna try to do a clean board and keep people off, to me, that's a violation of somebody's constitutional right. This is a volunteer board, and it's hard enough now to find people to sit on these boards and commissions, and to me, it's discriminatory, and we fixed what we asked Mr. Tillman to fix, and we need to see how that goes, because I'm quite sure if some people are not satisfied, they will come back and want to change it. But right now, we have a tenant, which was my concern, and a homeowner, and I think we may have people on the board that decides with the landlords, who says who their friends are, who they communicate with.
Well, you do have a point there, Mrs.
Who they communicate. They still can pick up the phone, but this issue's coming up, such thing. This is what I think.
I think putting that in there just goes back, it just brings back that us against them.
Yeah, we need to.
All right. I just wanted to raise the question because, that was one of the things brought up before.
I thought when we had the landlord language in there that it was really important that we were specifying that we should have a landlord representative on the board, and then to say that, but no one else should have that same interest. But personally, I think even getting into this level of specificity now, we're on this board where we're saying a homeowner and a landlord, I'm fine with it, or excuse me, a homeowner and a renter, I'm fine with it, to make sure that there's some representation with that regard. But I don't think I'm in favor of any more specificity than that.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none on the amendment. I'm sorry, we did adopt the amendment. On the broader question, ordinance 2281 as amended, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye.
Nay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you do that a little louder?
Well,
Could we have about 3 or 4 minutes off the table? Can we have a break?
We can have a break.
Just to stand up.
Sure. If we do that, what I'd like to do is come back and convene in closed session first, so the gentlemen who have been so patiently waiting here until 9
That's
o'clock
right, yeah.
to talk to us about our closed session item.
Well, we have staff sitting here waiting too, though, and we're paying them.
We need to get through this.
I'm gonna, if we take this break, what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back and close session.
I gotta make a motion.
Yeah, we will
I'm
have
gonna
to.
sit through this and get it over with.
Well, let's,
I'm the one in handicap, and if I sit here through this stuff.
we have been here a very long time though. I think
Can we just push through?
2 minutes.
It's gonna be more than 2 minutes for me.
Mr. Spees, could you wait until we get to the closed session?
As long as you like.
All
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Thank you for your patience. We'll get through ordinance 2282. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance 2282?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Tillman?
Okay. 2282 is again one of those that I put on the table before we started. There is no significant change other than correctly naming the accounts or numbers to which the money applies. The finance director and I had a conversation today where we double-checked all these things, and he approved the language in what's now in front of you. An ordinance of the city of 2282, an ordinance of the city of Salisbury approving an amendment of the FY14 general fund budget to appropriate funds to cover a new phone system for the city employees at the government office building. And whereas the city's existing phone system has been installed since 2000 and the manufacturer is no longer supporting the phone system, and the current phone system maintenance will not support the voicemail server after April 30th, and whereas a non-functioning voicemail system of the government office building would be detrimental to the services provided to the citizens, and whereas the city feels it necessary based on these circumstances to move the replacement of the existing phone system to FY14 to avoid potential outages and disruptions in the functioning of the phone equipment, and whereas the city's FY14 budget does not contain appropriation sufficient to cover this expense, now therefore be it ordained by the city, by the city council of the city of Salisbury, Maryland, that the city's fiscal year 2014 general fund budget be amended as follows: increase municipal buildings department by $70,000, increase surplus available account 10100-469-810 by an equivalent amount.
Mr. Stevenson, I had one question, about this, whether or not this would allow us to simultaneously have a primary number, a main number, and for there to be automated answer. Right now, the main number is the mayor's office, and hundreds of calls go into the mayor's office. As you know, it's your office that really, I think, take away from productive time of staff. So I would love to see, an automated, dial one for, welcome to the city of Salisbury.
Oh, no.
Dial one.
Oh, no.
Instead of it ringing
The
straight
mayor's
to the
office.
mayor's
Dial
office for
two
every
for-
single call.
No.
Yes.
Because I
Dial
like,
2 for the city clerk.
I like to do bodily harm to the person that called a voicemail. Because I think people want to see a part of that automated answer.
Well, but all you have to do is dial 1. You can get it.
Well, you're dealing with people that not all, see, everything's got so impersonal. We got email, as you know, I don't check my emails all the time. I like to talk to people on the telephone or meet people and talk to them. I think we go so technical, we become such a technical society that we lose the personal touch. And I don't agree with having an automated service for a city government. I think a person, when they call, I want to hear a human being.
Well, you and our mayor are peas in a pod then, because I know
Thank
he
you,
feels the
Jim.
same way. However, my only argument, and I agree that the personal touch is nice, but my only argument is that we lose a lot of, Sherelle's day and Donna's day answering the phone for calls that are going to other departments. They're not going to the mayor's office. They're not calls for the mayor's office, but that's the main number. So those calls,
Well, I see
they
what you're saying,
essentially
push one
become.
for the mayor's office, push 2 for the public.
That's all.
All right, okay.
It,
I
it,
wanna-
it
I
happens
can
all,
compromise.
it's all day long. I mean, we
can
even give
compromise
out
with that. As long as
telephone
they're not
numbers.
getting, you have reached the, well, I don't like, I
That's
just.
why you get the mayor answering the phone.
It could, it could even be the mayor's voice.
It's happened before.
That's what's
Jennifer, do you have something to contribute to
Go
this?
ahead.
So on the side, I'm trying to be a phone engineer. I'm just kidding. But I think, yes, we could look at doing that. And I think the reason for this phone system, this other phone system isn't necessarily the be-all, end-all. I think we might even be able to do that with the existing phone system. I have to look into it a little bit further. Okay? But the true reason behind doing this and moving this up is because the equipment that we have is no longer being supported by the manufacturer. So I understand your point, and we'll look at that a little bit further. My initial conversation with our current maintenance supplier, Telewire, pointed to, yes, we may be able to do that now. I don't know what that requires in terms of renumbering or anything like that, but I will look further into it.
And I don't mean to distract from the main purpose.
Oh, sure.
I thought if we're gonna replace them, let's do it right.
Two other things that I would like to see. I think the phones in here are county, so that would not help with our, necessarily, with our,
Ability to
ability to teleconference, yes, thank you. I'm having trouble with my words now. And the other thing is voicemail for council, if it can accommodate voicemail boxes for council.
Voicemail boxes. I'll look into that.
Because a lot of times people want them, but they can't.
Okay.
I don't want to have to check another one.
Four voicemail
I'm not
boxes for council.
Okay, I'll look into that even with our existing phone system,
Catch me at
okay?
McDonald's.
No, I wouldn't worry about anything with the existing phone system.
Oh, okay.
'Cause, I mean, if you're gonna replace it, why put the time in? So.
Okay.
And we understand too that when the county replaces their system, it's going to be compatible so that there'll be the ability to call
Yeah,
internally.
but maybe we could get one line in here. Works.
If you'd really like to do something, call the Verizon store and tell them to get my phone messages to me, not 3 days later, but the same day. That would be nice.
Okay.
Well, voicemail here, you could check it any time.
So, are there any other questions to the,
I'm fine with
to the ordinance 2282?
None.
All right.
Good.
Then all those in favor of ordinance number 2282, please signify your support by saying aye.
it. Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we got that, now we go to.
Okay. Next item is ordinance 2284.
Yep, 2284.
All right, is there a motion to adopt
So
ordinance
moved.
2284?
She's on a roll.
Mr. Tillman.
Hurry or anything.
Ordinance number 2284, its first reading, an ordinance of the city of Salisbury amending the FY14 general fund to appropriate $75,500 for making street maintenance improvements to portions of Mill Street, West Main Street, and West Market Streets. Whereas the Department of Public Works is currently making pavement improvements to Mill Street and West Main Street intersection as part of the CDBG pedestrian safety project, and whereas due to a high amount of traffic in this area, it's desired to extend the paving improvements as part of this project to adjoining intersections, providing continuity and lessening the impact of construction to the city citizens by performing the projects at one time, and whereas the recent development of property in the area of Mill Street, West Main Street, and West Market Street is desirable to also make improvements in these streets to reflect the revitalization of this area of the downtown. Now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Salisbury, Maryland, that the city's fiscal year FY14 general fund budget be amended as follows. Increase the general fund revenue current surplus available by $75,500, account 001-000-469810, and increase the general fund Department of Public Works engineering street maintenance by an equivalent amount.
Mr. Molds, do you have anything to present on this? I didn't know if you had that map to show where.
We have them.
How did the
Not to put you.
projector work? Not so well?
Not,
It worked, but in the interest of brevity, it's in your packet.
I see it.
We
You've
saw
got
it.
the colored areas that we did. We've got some remaining paving work on North Division and Cherry that we have our contractor lined up to do right around Easter. So the idea is, and that's why we brought this for you now, was to line up our other contractor with this Mill Street project and take advantage of the work that started at the pedestrian crossing there and extend that into the areas where we're seeing this revitalization ongoing.
well, this is super exciting. You know, I mean, this is, I know we've heard at times that from developers in the downtown area that they would rather see us do paving than anything else for them. So really exciting, and especially building on an ongoing grant, ongoing project that we have. Ms.
I have one
Shields?
question. The blue and the red, that's the project, correct?
Well, the red area is the project, that's the CDB project, that's that pedestrian crossing right there at the intersection.
Okay, good.
The extensions of the project that we proposed that ties in with the development to make it an overall project is that section that goes from 50 down to the four, Camden and everything. It's such a heavily traveled area.
But you say
and extend
15
it.
what?
From, the red area is from Route 50,
Okay.
and then you're going all the way down to where
Blue,
Riverside
you're
comes
gonna
in.
work on the blue, correct?
The blue would also be part of
Okay,
it.
because that where that little hump where it tears your car up.
Um,
Because I go that way, when I drive my car, I go
Okay.
that way. And it's a little hump, dip and it makes a noise. So that's gonna be
Is that with
alleviated.
the bridge? You're talking about the
Yes,
bridge?
yes, as you get,
That's that broken plate.
whatever it
There's an
is,
expansion plate.
we're gonna fix that.
We're gonna go out and try to look at that. It was,
Okay,
they
thank
tore
you.
the old plate out and paved over it, sort of a jury rig
What is
thing.
it, why is that plate there?
It's an expansion joint, because when the bridge contracts, the two pieces slide over, but
It's
there's one
kinda
section that broke away.
You know, hot and cold.
Yeah, yeah, okay, all
We
right.
had a chunk of steel over that at one time. That
Yeah,
was-
the
that
side
was-
that
that was
isn't there,
Wow.
that was torn, they actually
Oh.
took it all out, it's just paved over.
It scared me after when I first rode over, I thought it
Sorry.
tore the car up. Yeah.
So the area we're talking about is the blue, red, and yellow.
Okay, good, oh, yeah, that's, yeah.
All right, well, I think this is fantastic.
Yes.
You know, I think it's a good contribution to
Okay.
that area as well as to the access points to Camden and Riverside and Carroll. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor of ordinance number 2284, please signify your support by saying aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Great. And lastly, ordinance number 2285 for first reading, approving an amendment of the FY14 consulting fee budget related to the bricks and an environmental study. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 2285?
So, second.
Mr. Spies, and I got Ms. Shields. Okay, Mr. Tillman.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and read 2285 with the changes as discussed with Mr. Cordry. An ordinance of the City of Salisbury approving an amendment of the FY14 general fund budget to appropriate funds to cover an environmental study at the building commonly known as the Bricks, city-owned surplus property located at 432-434 East Church Street, Salisbury, Maryland. Whereas the building commonly known as the Bricks has been declared surplus by the city, where it is the intent of the city to sell this property, whereas the Bricks, a building of approximately 8,400 square feet, was built in 1920 and has been vacant for 10 to 12 years and shows significant signs of deferred maintenance resulting in extensive interior damage. And whereas it is in the best interest of the city to have proper environmental testing of the building so as to provide disclosure statements related to any mold, asbestos, and lead paint that may be present at such location. And whereas the city's FY14 budget does not contain an appropriation sufficient to cover this expense, now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Salisbury, Maryland, that the city's FY 2014 general fund budget be and hereby is amended as follows: increase in the mayor department by $1,200, increase in the current year surplus 01000-469810 by $1,200.
Thank you, Mr. Tillman. Before getting into some questions, is anyone willing to make that amendment to change consulting fee budget on line 4 and line 25 to general fund budget?
So this is first reading, do we actually have to?
We don't have to, but we could take care of it now.
So moved.
Second.
No, I'm just saying,
Right.
it because it was published that way, you want to do an actual amendment, I mean, it was published.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry,
other
you're
way.
right. Yeah, we don't have to necessarily.
We haven't done a reading.
The changes are just the accurate account names.
Right.
And I've read it correctly into the record tonight, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
Okay,
all right.
could we just make sure that it's posted with the
Posted
change?
correctly.
Correct, all right.
So that for second reading, the proper amount of time of its posting will have met the code.
So my one question on this is that the one time the council, since I've been here anyway, discussed the bricks, and I realized there's some history here. We said we wanted it to go out to RFP, and we didn't want to, there wasn't a potential buyer, or the plan had, fallen through, I guess, from years ago, or wasn't approved. And so we wanted it to go out in an RFP. I'm guessing that this is necessary to figure out the environmental condition. Can you just provide some background there?
Yes, it was, number one, recommended before it went out to RFP that we got an appraisal on the building.
Okay.
And that had been done like around December, January, when we finally got the results. The results of the appraisal suggested that we get an environmental study because when we do put it up for sale, it's obvious when you go in the building that there is probably some of those environmental conditions that would exist that may need to be disclosed. Secondly, if even a very minute situation, if we have a pre-bid meeting and we'd want somebody to, the potential bidders to come and see it.
Understood.
If I were a buyer, I'd ask those questions.
Yeah.
So,
Love to buy that cool old building, to be perfectly honest with you.
so we'd like to have this done prior to putting it out for RFP.
Understood.
And if the buyer didn't ask the questions, the bank would.
True.
It's a cool old building with a lot of potential, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. All those in favor of ordinance 2285, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you all very much. I know it's been an incredibly long night. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Okay. I will now entertain a motion to enter closed session.
So moved.
All right. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Could we just, for the public's edification?
Yes, we
give them
absolutely-
some clue as to generally what it's sort of
Absolutely can.
about?
This is actually, and I believe it's published to discuss with council, specifically on our Comcast cable franchise agreement, the details of that agreement, the progress we've made in those negotiations, and we will hear from our council where we are in those negotiations and discuss next steps.
Okay, I was going to ask, are we expected to actually take action tonight, or is this primarily for an update?
This was, I'm sorry, Mr. Stevenson, do you have?
Just for the purpose of update.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And that was my understanding. So we will discuss and we'll report back shortly on the results of our discussion, what we can report back. All right. Is there any other discussion before we? Okay. All those in favor of entering closed session, please signify your support by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Okay. Thank you all.
Young man in the back.